Chapter 12:10. After Qiao Jingdao came out of the Taihao sect, he searched everywhere for enemies. At the same time, he was very careful. After all, he had just entered the grotto heaven and was only in the first layer. There were many people in the Qinsong and Shaoqing sects who were stronger than him, not to mention the nascent soul cultivators that he couldn't even muster the will to fight back. Yet, after traveling for dozens of realms, he didn't run into anyone. However, when he passed by a valley, he found a talisman left behind by a Yuan Yang sect cultivator. He caught it and looked at it, saying, "This is the mark left behind by Master and Spiritual Master Fu. It's just that when they left the letter, they seemed to be in a hurry. Maybe they ran into an enemy. I should hurry over to help. Luckily, with this clue, it'll be easy to find them." This letter was left about an hour ago. After looking at it, he destroyed it. Then, it gathered into one again and stayed in place. If a Yuan Yang sect cultivator passed by, it wouldn't be hard to find them. As for cultivators from other sects, it would be hard to find them. After taking care of things, he got up and flew again. About a moment later, there was suddenly the sound of wings flapping in front of him. Then, he saw a white figure flying over. Almost in the instant he saw it, it was already very close. The two killing true weapons on him didn't wait for a call, they already turned into light and rushed out, protecting him. The other party was forced by the sword Qi and also paused for a moment, not coming over. Only now did Qiao Jingdao see clearly that it was a white-feathered wild goose. It was 100 feet long, rainbow light flowing behind its tail. He recognized this as the Dharma of a Nanhua sect cultivator, but he couldn't tell who it was. He bowed and said, "Which spiritual master of Nanhua sect is in front?" The white-feathered wild goose said, "Spiritual Master Qiao, I am Yunyi Wang. There's a great enemy chasing behind me, so it's not convenient to talk here. Fellow Taoist, you should leave quickly to avoid being targeted." After saying that, he flapped his wings and hurriedly flew away. Qiao Jingdao was shocked. From Yunyi Wang's words, he could tell that there was more than one person chasing behind him. Since the enemy situation was unclear, he wouldn't take the initiative to go forward. However, if he retreated now, it would be difficult to find Spiritual Master Fu and Spiritual Master Wen. While he was hesitating, there was a flash of light in the distance. Two silver boats quickly flew over with a male and a female cultivator standing on them. When Qiao Jingdao saw the two of them, his expression tightened. Looking at the speed of the silver boat, he knew that it would be impossible for him to get rid of it, so he simply stood still and released the two killing swords, holding them in front of him. At the same time, he cupped his hands and said, "Immortal Qin." Jinrenshin. Dao Master Qin's phoenix eyes swept over and said, "Yuan Yang disciple?" She glanced at the two killing swords again and said in a seemingly casual manner, "Junior Martial Brother Shin, you go first. Leave this person to me." Shen Baishuang didn't hesitate at all. With a swing of the fishing rod on his shoulder, he had already grasped the direction in which Yuan Qi Wang's aura had fled. He then urged the silver boat beneath him to transform into a dazzling streak of silver light and fly away. Qiao Jingdao relaxed a little. If the two of them teamed up, even if he had two killing swords with him, he would not be confident. But now, he only had to face one person. Even if the opponent's cultivation was stronger than his, it wasn't as if he didn't have the slightest chance of winning. But he didn't dare to let down his guard. He thought to himself, this immortal Qin is the daughter of the Qinsong school's previous headmaster, and is of the same generation as the current headmaster. She should have many powerful magical treasures on her. If I let her go all out, I definitely won't be her opponent. Only by attacking first will I have a chance of winning. And my chance will only be in the first few attacks. If it doesn't work, then I can only think of a way to escape. He quickly calculated all the chips he could use and came up with a countermeasure. At this moment, Shen Baishuang was already far away. An Qin Yu seemed to be disdainful of making the first move against the younger generation. She stood on the boat without moving. He didn't hold back either. With a deep shout, he raised the two swords and slashed towards the silver boat, one in front and one behind. Qin Yu's eyes flickered. She flipped her wrist and made a sign, placing it horizontally in front of her chest. Instantly, a pair of jade rings flew out. Between the two rings was a red silk with a red tassel hanging from it. It looked like a pear. The two killing swords sensed that this ring was not simple. They turned into flowing lights and wanted to go around it. However, the two rings buzzed and actually disappeared into thin air. When they appeared again, they were already one ring each, holding the two killing swords in place. Qiao Jingdao was startled, but he was also decisive. He knew that he had yet to refine these two swords, and since the other party had locked them up, he might not be able to help them escape. Therefore, he did not summon them with his dharma, but instead released a sword disc. There was a brilliant golden light spinning on top of it, and with another leap, it turned into thousands of sword lights that attacked. Qin Yu stretched out a slender finger and tapped lightly. A water wall appeared in front of her. It seemed to reflect a lotus flower and the moon. All the sword lights disappeared when they fell into it. When Qiao Jingdao saw this, he became even more fearful. However, he did not stop moving and used the primordial yang divine ability, Myriad Lives Sword Furnace. Just now, wherever the sword light had shot past, sword chi would appear out of thin air. The sharpness pointed inward and attacked from all directions. From the outside, Qin Yu's body seemed to have an additional layer of tightly interwoven sword net. This divine ability still needed a strand of sword chi that hadn't been eliminated. It would appear through the sword chi. But as long as it could be resisted, it would disappear within 100 breaths. This technique didn't focus on killing. It was used to restrain the opponent, making it easier for the cultivator to use divine abilities such as the fatal sword. Qiao Jingdao knew that it wasn't time for him to fight with his life on the line. There was no need for him to use a method that was close to perishing together with his opponent. He only took out a sign and a large tablet flew out from behind him. What he did earlier was to bring out the Boundary Mountain Sword tablet. The one he had used before had long been broken. This one was something he had refined again after achieving the heavenly abode. The tablet activated extremely quickly. The moment it appeared, it enveloped him and Qin Yu. When he arrived here, the magic power in his body increased by more than 30%. So, with a thought, a sharp sword light shot out from his eyes. This was the primordial yang divine ability, Hidden Eye True Sword. Wherever the eye looked, it would definitely hit. The closer it was to the opponent, the greater its power. However, when Qin Yu was hit by the sword, her figure shattered like glass. In the end, only a ball of qi was left behind. Qiao Jingdao's expression changed. How could he not see that it was only a shadow that had been sucked into the sword tablet? The Boundary Mountain Sword tablet had always hit its target and had never missed. Now that he missed this opportunity, he was caught unprepared. At this moment, in the outside world, Qin Yu was on a water mirror with a lotus spinning in her hand. There was a trace of mockery in her phoenix eyes. With a flick of her wrist, she gently sent the lotus forward, allowing it to shine on the Boundary Mountain Sword tablet. The petals closed up, and with another hand seal, a water mirror appeared out of thin air below. The flower bud slowly sank, and in a short while, it disappeared into the mirror. At this moment, in another place, Zhang Yan had not been flying for long in search of the qi before he found his location. With a step, he charged into a void space. He swept his gaze around, but found that the surroundings were empty. There was no trace of anyone. The strange thing was that the qi was still lingering here, and had not disappeared. As he searched, he found several stone golems that were around 100 feet tall. These stone golems did not look much different from humans. Aside from the fact that their heads did not have any facial features, their torsos and limbs were complete. There were 7 finger-sized holes on their faces, and that was where the aura was coming from. After a few careful glances, he pondered, could this be the person sealing stone? To think that they were able to find this thing. This stone did not exist in the 9 continents, and it fell from the sky, so it could be considered rare. Speaking of which, it did not have much use, but if it was opened according to the position of a person's acupoints, it would continuously absorb spirit qi for a short period of time. To those who did not know the details, it would look like a mysterious hole. If a cultivator channeled their qi into it, outsiders would not be able to tell if it was real or fake when sensing it from afar. The people of the devil sect must have used this thing to deceive his eyes and ears, making him think that this was the place where they gathered. He could not help but ponder in his heart. The other party spent a lot of effort to make such an arrangement, and it was not just to lure him here. There should be other plans. If it was to lure him away so that he could go to the void space where Meng Zhen was, it did not seem like it. In his senses, there was no one going there. As for whether this person had the ability to deceive the heavens, it was even more impossible. If he really could do it, then he could just directly go over, and there was no need to waste time to go around him. Since it was not for the above reasons, then it was very likely that this person was trying to buy time to make some arrangements. Just as he was about to sense again to find the correct location of these people, he heard the sound of a sword. Looking over, he saw a grayish-white smoke passing through from an unknown place and killing towards where he was. At the same time, Lien Yitong was burying formation flags and formation plates everywhere. At this moment, his heart moved and he looked up. He saw a spiritual light in the sky, and 4 Taoists rushed over. They were the Netherworld Spring Sect cultivators Xin Yu and Gong Liangchu, the Hunqing Sect cultivator Huan Yong, and the Jiuling Sect cultivator Lu Bian. Lien Yitong's expression relaxed slightly, and after the 4 came over and greeted them, he asked, "Only the 4 of you came?" He thought that this ambush of Zhang Yan was not a small matter, and the more people, the better. Xin Yu said in a low voice, "Zhenren Yu of my sect has died, and Zhenren Xiahou is fighting with Ing Chuanqiu and can't get away." Lien Yitong asked again, "Why are Zhenren Yuan and Zhenren Li not here?" Gong Liangchu said, "They seem to be held back by the cultivators of Qinsong School." Lien Yitong frowned and said, "Didn't Sect Master Shui use his illusion to hold them back?" Xin Yu shook his head and said, "Sect Master Shui is fighting with 2 cultivators from Huanjin Temple. Even if he has cultivated his primordial form, I'm afraid he can't get away." Shui Dingyuan was one of the 3 cultivators who had cultivated his primordial form among the 6 demonic sections. During the demonic calamity, he made use of the turbid qi to achieve this. If it were other cultivators, it would be easy to deal with, but Huanjin Temple was proficient in the art of subduing demons, and they were able to suppress the techniques of the Ling sect in every way. This caused him to be tied up, and he couldn't take care of the overall situation. Lien Yitong said in a low voice, "I see. We can't blame Sect Master Shui for this. From the looks of it, there will only be 6 of us in the battle with Zhang Yan later." Gong Liangchu laughed and said, "Actually, it's better this way. These fellow Taoists are all held back, and this means that no one will come to disturb us. With the combined power of the 6 of us, and 2 sect guarding treasures, can we still not kill this person?" Chapter 12:11. After Lien Yitong and the others discussed the specific countermeasures, they went to the surroundings to arrange the formation flags. This formation was also very particular. It could not be too wide or too thin. If it was too wide, it could make Zhang Yan feel that there was no hope of breaking the formation in a short period of time and turn around. If it was too thin, it could quickly break in, causing them to lose a lot of time to prepare. About half an hour later, the spiritual light in the sky suddenly dispersed, and an incomparably turbid grayish-white smoke drifted down from the sky. Lien Yitong said, "Sect Master Chiu has arrived." However, when he carefully examined it, his expression slightly froze and he thought, "That's not right, this presence is very weak. Could Sect Master Chiu have been heavily injured?" He couldn't help but feel a bit more worried. He already felt that 6 people attacking together was not enough. If Chiu Fengrui had been injured, then the strength of their side would decrease. At this time, Xin Yu and the others also came over. When the gray-white smoke landed on the ground, there was a rumble and Chiu Fengrui appeared. However, anyone could see that his avatar was very weak at this moment. It was obvious that he had used up a lot of his Fa Li and Essence Qi. Lien Yitong came forward and bowed. "Sect Master Chiu, are you well?" Chiu Fengrui shook his head and did not answer. He took out a pill from his sleeve and swallowed it, closing his eyes to adjust his breathing. Everyone looked at each other and waited patiently at the side. After a short while, Chiu Fengrui's vital energy recovered slightly, and only then did he stand up and bow before apologizing to them. My vital energy was unstable just now, and I urgently needed to protect my vital energy. I've neglected all of you, fellow Taoists. Everyone said that he was fine. Lien Yitong then asked about the matter everyone was concerned about. Sect Master Chiu, how is the matter? When this matter was mentioned, there was still some shock in Chiu Fengrui's eyes. He sighed and said, Zhang Yan really is powerful. If I hadn't given up an ability, I almost wouldn't have been able to return. Even so, I still used 60% of my Fa Li as the price to create a clear yang spirit body to delay him. Just now I was able to escape. Lien Yitong nodded. No wonder. I was wondering why Sect Master Chiu's aura had become so weak. Gong Liangchu smiled and took out a porcelain bottle. He raised it and said, This is my Nether Spring Sex Elixir, the Yellow Spring Elixir. If he took it now, it would help Sect Leader Chiu recover his Essence Qi. However, if he didn't have enough Essence Qi in 3 days, he would return to his original state. That pill will swallow all the remaining Essence energy, and it is very likely that you will lose your life. At this point he tossed the pill over. The pros and cons have been stated. Whether or not to use it is entirely up to Sect Master Chiu. After Chiu Fengrui took it, he thought for a moment and poured out a yellow pill. With a thought, he absorbed it into his body. He had thought it through. In the upcoming battle, if he were to face the enemy with his weakened body, there was a high chance that he would die. Only by recovering his strength would there be hope. As for replenishing Essence Qi, it wasn't too difficult. As long as he defeated his opponent this time, he would be able to obtain it. If he failed, he wouldn't have to worry about the future. He channeled his energy and instantly felt a wave of Essence Qi spreading in his body. In an instant, spiritual opportunity filled his body, and his mana recovered quickly. Within 10 breaths, he was full of vigor. It was as if he was at his peak. He sensed it and was delighted. He bowed to Gong Liangchu and said, Thank you, fellow Taoist. Gong Liangchu smiled and said, This method is just a waste of money. It has to be paid back eventually. Sect Leader Chiu, you don't have to thank me. At this moment, there was a loud rumble in the sky. It was as if Feng Jiekong was hit by something huge. Chiu Fengrui looked up and said with a grave expression, It should be Zhang Yan. Lien Yitong said, We have set up a formation here. He won't be able to break in for now. We still have some time. Chiu Fengrui nodded. He shook his sleeve and a white light flew out. A 70 to 80 feet tall boulder appeared in front of everyone. The boulder was bumpy and uneven, but it reflected everyone's appearance on it. It looked extremely broken. He took out a spell and the boulder shook. It turned into countless fine dust and sand that scattered in all directions. This was the treasure of his sect, the murky ground white Yin stone. Once this stone melted, under the shroud of Qi dynamic, as long as it was a cultivator on his side, no matter how they moved, the enemy would not be able to sense their exact location. Even the supernatural powers and Dao techniques that the cultivator used would be undetectable. It was like a deaf and blind person. Without knowing where the enemy was, no matter who it would be good if they could use even half of their abilities. Lien Yitong took out a scroll from his sleeve. The two ends of the scroll were made of 2 jade-like white bones. He held it in his hand and said solemnly, I need to borrow everyone's Qi dynamic. Everyone did not hesitate. They separated a strand of their Qi dynamic and sent it to him. Lien Yitong grabbed it and slapped it on the scroll. Then he threw the scroll into the sky. The scroll turned into a cloud of fog and disappeared into the world. This was the treasure of the Bone Yin sect. It was called the 100 Lives Yin Bone Scroll. Once the scroll was unfolded, it could be said to be everywhere within a certain domain. As long as a cultivator's Qi dynamic was connected to this scroll, if they suffered a fatal injury, the Yin bones in the scroll would immediately come out and die in their place. However, if they were not a member of the Bone Yin sect, each person could only die in their place 3 times. If they exceeded this limit, the injuries they suffered the first 3 times would be returned to them. Although these 2 treasures of the sect could not attack the enemy, they had great uses. It was because of these 2 treasures that they were confident in ambushing Zhang Yan. At this moment, the the sounds of collisions in the sky became louder and louder. The chi of the array was also scattered. It was obvious that Zhang Yan would soon break the array and enter. After exchanging a few more words, the 6 of them dispersed. Their expressions gradually became incomparably solemn as they waited for the arrival of this great enemy. Lien Yitong looked around. The 6 of them here were all the strength they could muster in a hurry. If they still could not defeat Zhang Yan, not to mention the revival of the spirit sect, they might even lose this battle. It must be known that at this moment, there was still the soaring feather technique above their heads. If they lost, it was likely to affect the overall situation. If they won, they could reverse the entire situation. Outside the array, Zhang Yan stood in the air with his hands behind his back. He was using the 5 elements hand to constantly bombard the array in front of him. Although he understood the theory of arrays, this was a dead array. There was no entrance or exit. If he wanted to enter, he could only use his Fa Li to forcefully break it. If his senses were not wrong, there were at least 6 chi dynamics in this place. The other party's intention to lure him here was very obvious. However, he did not mind. Instead, he was happy to see the other party like this. Originally, he wanted to go to each of them one by one, but now he could save a lot of effort. After about 100 breaths, the originally turbulent array was finally shattered by his palm. The 5 elements hand's remaining power was not exhausted, and it was still pressing straight down. Seeing this, the 6 of them knew that his Fa Li was vigorous. They did not want to block it head-on, and they all used their escape techniques to disperse. Just at the moment when the big hand was about to hit the ground, it suddenly disappeared without a trace, as if it was just a breeze that floated past. Although it was not the first time the 6 of them saw such a method of lifting something heavy as if it was light and changing the Fa Li according to his will, they still felt shocked when they saw it again. Seeing that there was no obstruction in front of him, Zhang Yan floated over slowly on his chi. However, when his gaze swept back and forth, there was only a vast expanse of whiteness in front of him. He could not see anyone, and he could not sense anything unusual in his senses. He did not let his guard down. He immediately scattered the sword light around him and used a sword heart trueness technique. However, in the flashing sword light, he did not see any traces of his whereabouts. Right at this moment, he suddenly heard the cries of swords resounding out from all directions, and he instantly knew that the situation wasn't good. With a command in his heart, the world leaf had already flown out from his sleeve. At practically the exact same instant, numerous brilliant magic artifacts descended and blasted onto the treasure. For a time, clear ripples rippled out from the collision, causing the treasure to shake endlessly, and it seemed to be on the verge of shattering. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed, and he immediately determined that those people should be here. However, he did not know what method they used to not only conceal their figures, but also their chi dynamics. Under the premise that he could not find his opponent, he did not want to be beaten on the spot. Thus, he took out the technique, and lightning flashed on his body. In the blink of an eye, he had already escaped into the Xianyuan paradise. The 6 people from the Devil sect did not expect this, and were all caught off guard. Xinyu Yu said in surprise, "How can this person escape into the paradise? Could it be that it was not damaged?" He originally thought that under the mysterious technique of Butian Pavilion, other than the nascent embryo cultivators, the rest of the paradises should have collapsed. He did not think that Zhang Yan's paradise was actually still intact. Spiritual Master Lu thought for a moment and said, "Everyone do not need to worry. This place is covered by Yu Xiao's mysterious technique. He will definitely not be able to go anywhere else. Even if he comes out, he will still fall here." Gong Liangchu suddenly said, "What if he does not come out?" Everyone could not help but frown. From their point of view, this was not impossible. If the other party could use his own strength to delay the 6 of them, it would be extremely worthwhile. But they also did not dare to leave this place. If more than 4 people went to the spatial realm of shattering, they would definitely go to other places, and that would undoubtedly spread out their strength. If Zhang Yan suddenly attacked at this time, it would give them a chance to attack one by one. Spiritual Master Huan said, "How about this? We will continue to set up the formation flags and restrictions outside. The later this person comes out, the harder it will be to break through. If he does not come out, then let him be. Once the restrictions are set up, we can leave this place without worry and go to help sect leader Feng. Qiu Fengrui agreed. This is a good plan. There is no time to lose, we will start right away. After Zhang Yan entered the paradise, he thought for a moment, and as for how to deal with the concealment technique, he already had a few ideas. With a flick of his sleeve, several hundred crystal jades the size of pigeon eggs flew out from his sleeve and circled in the air. These were the discernment stones that he had refined earlier. When used in battle, he could determine the movements of his opponent's qi. However, this was still not safe enough. He tossed out hundreds of talismans. These were talismans of truth, which were also talismans that he had refined before the battle. Even if there was no qi dynamic, he could still find out the general location of the enemy. He did not know which one of them would be useful, and he would only know after trying it out. He even prepared himself for the fact that they would all be useless. With a thought, countless lightning flashed on his body, and with a rumble, he escaped from the paradise. Chapter 12:12. The moment Zhang Yan rushed out, a huge surge of spiritual vigor had already shaken this side of the void. Qiu Fengrui and the others were shocked. They thought, it's here. At this moment, they saw that in that ball of spiritual light, besides sword lights, there were also countless crystals and talismans surging out. Because they didn't know what it was, the 6 of them were extremely careful and quickly scattered in all directions. No matter what, their lives were their own, even with the protection of the 2 sect-guarding treasures. Since there was a chance to kill the opponent by hiding behind and attacking from a distance, there was no need to take the risk. After retreating to a distance, the 6 of them no longer had any scruples. They shouted and channeled their mana, summoning their magic treasures to attack. Just now Zhang Yan appeared in the field. He had already released the heaven and earth leaf to protect himself and continuously channeled mana into it. In the past, he never did this. He only used the heaven and earth leaf to defend against external attacks. But it was different now. There were too many methods in the demonic sect, such as the self-sacrificing technique, the soul attack technique, the spirit fixing technique, and so on. If these many magic treasures were used individually, it would not be difficult for him to deal with, but if several of them worked together, it would be quite difficult to deal with. Even if he had a 5th transformation body of strength path, unless it was absolutely necessary, he didn't want to use his body to resist. At this moment, a rumbling sound came from the top. It was obvious that the attack from the opposite side had arrived, but under his full protection, when it hit the heaven and earth leaf, it only caused ripples of clear light. It only made this treasure tremble. It did not break. This was within his expectations. The opponent didn't have a nascent body cultivator. They couldn't break the heaven and earth leaf in one hit. This gave him a chance to use his method. But he didn't take this opportunity to check out the location of the few people. Instead, he made a hand sign and channeled his technique. With a thought, a purple gas shot up to the sky from his back. In just a breath's time, there were lumps of purple clouds gathering. Then, the rumbling sound of thunder spread to the 9 heavens. Lien Yitong hurriedly reminded, "It's the purple cloud heavenly thunder, everyone be careful." Fortunately, they already knew that Zhang Yan would obtain this magic treasure. They were already prepared before the battle. They channeled mana into their magic treasures, propping up rays of light outside their bodies. After a short while, countless bolts of purple lightning fell from the sky. A dozen or so bolts of lightning landed on the 6 of them. However, their bodies only trembled slightly before they managed to block it. Zhang Yan did not expect this mystic art to be able to finish off his opponent. Right now, because he could not see his opponent's position, the lightning could only strike in the air. This undoubtedly diluted the power of the mystic art. It would already be good if even 1,000th of it could hit its target. This move was not aimed at killing the enemy. It was enough as long as it could restrain these people. But just relying on the might of this thunder wasn't enough. He flicked his sleeve again, and the surrounding 10,000 kilometers suddenly became filled with fog. At the same time, drops of profound black water floated out. If his opponent could conceal himself, he could do the same. However, these water droplets were not deep abyssal heavy water, but Xianming heavy water. Now that he no longer had the dragon soul essence in his possession, he could no longer use it. Controlling this water would consume a lot more Fa Li, so before he could break through the detection barrier, there was no need to use this killing technique. After unleashing the two arts at the same time, although the 6 of them weren't really threatened, they were greatly disturbed. They still had ways to get rid of the thick fog and the Xianming heavy water that covered the sky. However, the heavenly thunder of purple cloud was very troublesome. Although it was just striking randomly, the thunderous sound contained the power to subdue demons. It made the cloudy spiritual vigor in their bodies unstable, and the circulation was a little sluggish. They couldn't attack without restraint like just now. Zhang Yan immediately felt the pressure on the outside lesson. At this moment, he could finally split some attention and use the talisman and stone to try to find his opponent's location. At this moment, the identification stones that flew out shattered one by one under the collision of the Fa Li. He couldn't help but notice the aura on it. He immediately headed in that direction and tried to pull out the 6 people. However, after a short while, the location of the few people changed. After a few breaths, they were in another place. It seemed like they were constantly changing. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Although he could be on guard against the other party's supernatural power and talisman, it was still difficult to use it to injure the enemy. As for the talisman, once it reached the outside, it immediately turned into light and flew away. It was obvious that it had found its target. However, halfway through, it suddenly disappeared without a trace. He immediately realized that the talisman and the 6 people's chi dynamic were connected. They were shrouded by the secret technique of their bodies, so he couldn't see them either. The talisman was indeed one of the talismans recorded in Xinchang's will. However, talisman techniques also needed to change. A single talisman couldn't be used in every battle. It was obvious that in this situation, it wouldn't be of much use. If Xinchang was here, he might be able to use several talisman techniques to coordinate and find the enemy. However, he wasn't a person who specialized in talisman techniques, so he naturally couldn't do that. Fortunately, he had already prepared himself for failure. He thought to himself, since these 2 methods aren't effective, then I can only use that one. I don't believe I can't catch you. Just as he was testing the waters, the 6 of them also attacked without ceasing. However, after the world leaf received the infusion of its master's magic power, its might had risen by more than a level, and it blocked all the attacks that came over without missing a single one. Because Fei Yu had found a loophole last time, it was difficult to deceive it with a formless change. Among the 6 demon sects, the Nether Spring sect and the Blood Soul sect were the most powerful. Their methods were also the sharpest. While the remaining 4 sects had their own strengths, they were slightly lacking in a frontal attack. Even though there were 2 Nether Spring cultivators here, it wasn't enough to break through this item in a short amount of time. Lien Yitong frowned. If they continued fighting like this, they would be able to break through the defense sooner or later. However, there was an inexplicable uneasiness in his heart. He felt that if this went on, this person would have a chance to retaliate. He thought for a while and said to everyone, "Everyone, I have a bone-burying umbrella in my hand. As long as we find a way to break that protective treasure, we can use this umbrella to trap this person. We only need an instant to take his life." This umbrella was extremely vicious. It was made from the bones of demons and contained a strand of yin qi. It had the ability to cut off yang and end one's life. Even if a nascent body cultivator was covered by this umbrella, he would still die. However, when this umbrella flew, it was too slow for a cultivator. Fortunately, he had a method that, together with the murky white yin stone, prevented the opponent from sensing this treasure. Lu Zhenren thought for a while and said, "I have a vertical nail in my hand. It can stop this person's chi dynamic for a moment, making it impossible for him to escape into the cave. It can be used with Leader Lien's treasure." Xin Yu said in a low voice, "Then we have to break this treasure first." Just now when Chu Rui and Zhang Yan were fighting, the 2 killing swords took turns slashing down, but they could not do anything to this thing. Gong Liangchu laughed and said, "I can help. I have an item here that everyone should recognize. It's called Dazzling Star Devilish Chi. It can pollute the spiritual nature of a real treasure and take away its essence. However, once it is used, I dare not control it too much. Everyone should be careful, lest the devilish chi contaminates your body and grinds away your mana and essence. When everyone heard this, they could not help but look over. They did not expect him to dare to carry such a dangerous item with him. The Dazzling Star Devilish Chi was one of the 3 dirtiest types of chi in the world. It could even penetrate the Qiankuan sleeve. If one were to accidentally touch it, it would be a small matter. If one's dharmakaya was tainted, even one's spirit would not be able to escape. Qiu Fengrui was overjoyed and said, "Zhenren Gong Liangchu has this item, please use it quickly." Gong Liangchu carefully took out a jade bottle from his sleeve. Although he was bold, he did not dare to use the Qiankuan sleeve to store this item. He only used this jade bottle to store it. Even so, he had to change it every 3 days to prevent the devilish chi from corroding the bottle wall and coming out. After taking out the item, he did not pull out the stopper. Instead, he turned it into a wisp of yellow smoke and lifted it up. He sent it directly towards Zhang Yan. However, to prevent being contaminated by the devilish chi, he hurriedly withdrew his mana halfway. At this moment, Zhang Yan was about to make his move. However, at this moment, he felt an extremely obscure spiritual vigor from the identification stone. Suddenly, he heard the sound of a sword. It was more urgent than the previous warning sounds. His gaze froze. It meant that the other party had a move that could threaten him. Instantly, he became alert. In a flash, he had already kept the Qiankuan leaf. The avatar behind him had already stood out. He raised his hand and pressed down. It was the Xuanzhuan Tianluo wall. When the Dazzling Star Devilish Chi arrived, it splashed onto the Chi wall. Although it was continuously being moved away, it was also continuously corroding the spiritual vigor. Through the connection of Chi dynamic, it quickly followed the arm of the avatar and had the tendency to spread to the body. Zhang Yan instantly judged that the avatar would definitely not be able to withstand the corrosion of the devilish chi. He immediately sent a sword aura over and chopped off the avatar's arm. At the same time, he raised his sleeves and stirred up a gust of wind. It swept away the remaining devilish chi. Lien Yi had been waiting outside for an opportunity. Seeing that Zhang Yan had kept the Qiankuan leaf, he took out the bone-bearing umbrella and flew towards the other side. At the same time, he sent a telepathic message to the 5 of them, "Everyone, I have taken out the umbrella. I hope that everyone can restrain this person and not let him escape." Everyone knew that it was a rare opportunity. Disregarding the lightning outside, they all took out their best supernatural powers and treasures. In an instant, spiritual vigor surged and the situation in the field suddenly became intense. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered. To him, as long as he could sense where the attack was coming from, it would not be difficult to guard against it. He raised his sleeves and pressed forward with his palm. With a rumble, the void collapsed instantly. 2 of the attacks were dispersed halfway. There were still 2 that landed on his body, but they were blocked by a layer of devilish chi. With a flash, the avatar stood in front of him. He raised his finger and made a sign. There was a rumbling sound and a ray of water light surged out from behind him. With just a roll, all the treasures were trapped in it. For a moment, they could only entangle with the spiraling water and could not escape. In just a moment, the bone-bearing umbrella had already floated above Zhang Yan. It looked like as long as it landed, it would be able to cover him and take his life. Just now, Zhenren Lu did not participate in the siege. Instead, he had been holding the standing nail in his hand. Seeing that the opportunity that he had been waiting for had finally arrived, he waved his sleeves and threw it out. Chapter 12:13. When the vertical nail flew out, it was soundless, and it was not a technique to hurt the enemy. Even people with sharp senses would not be able to detect it. Once one's chi dynamic was pinned by the nail, no matter how powerful one's mana was, as long as one had not ascended and had not broken through the boundary between heaven and man, one would not be able to move or circulate mana. Zhang Yan also did not feel the nail coming. But since he dared to remove the heaven and earth leaf, he was already fully prepared. At this moment he suddenly felt his body shake, as if something was fixing him on the spot. At this moment, not only could he not circulate his mana and spiritual vigor, even his clone could not move. At the same time, a chilly wind surged from above, as if it was going to cover him. Although he could not see what it was, he could see that it was carefully set up by the other party. In addition to the warning sound of the sword, he knew that he must not let it fall. Seeing that the thing was about to fall, he only raised his head slightly and blew out a breath of clear air. With a loud bang, the strong air shook the void. The bone-burying umbrella was hit by the chi dynamic, but it paused in the air and had the momentum to roll up. Lien Yitong was shocked. How is this possible? The bone-bearing umbrella was a real treasure, and it contained his own mana. It was not something that could be easily knocked away by a breath of clear air. Gong Liangchu smiled, looked at Qiu Fengrui, and said, "Looking at this situation, I think this Zhang Yan can already sense where my attack is coming from." Sect leader Lien's treasure focuses on concealment. If it was discovered first, then it would not have any power to speak of. Even if this person does not use this method, I think he has other ways to break it. It is really not sect leader Lien's fault. Qiu Fengrui's expression was not good. It was obvious that there was a problem here, and he could not cover all his chi dynamic. Xinyu Yu said in a low voice, "No need to say more. Let's think about how to get rid of this person. Since we did not succeed this time, we will try again. With the murky ground white stone to help me hide, no matter how powerful this person is, he will not be our opponent." Everyone nodded. No matter what, they had the 100 lives diagram and the white Yin stone, so they didn't have to worry about making mistakes. They also didn't have to worry about making any mistakes, because Zhang Yan couldn't do anything to them. On the other hand, as long as Zhang Yan made a mistake, he would be defeated and killed. The effect of the erect nail only lasted for an instant. After Zhang Yan escaped from it, he first ordered his avatar to chase the bone-burying umbrella away. Then he called out in his mind. Celestial music sounded, and a beam of light shot out from the center of his brows. As soon as it came out, it spun in the air. It headed straight for the person closest to it, as if the white Yin stone's aura concealment had no effect on it at all. Zhang Yan narrowed his eyes when he saw this. Just as he had expected, in the eyes of the devil slip, everyone in the devil sect was its prey. Even if he hadn't killed his opponents and couldn't absorb their essence chi, it wouldn't stop him from actively searching for the chi. His gaze followed it and saw that under the illumination of the brilliant light, a blurry silhouette appeared in the distance. As soon as he discovered the location of his opponent, his gaze flashed and he immediately moved. With a flick of his sleeve, not only did he release the 2 swords of slaughter, the lesser 5-element devil slaughter divine lightning and the Qingxian soaring lightning shock burst out at the same time. Because he already had the intention to end this person quickly, these 2 divine abilities were activated violently under the activation of his vast spiritual power. It was as if the sky was collapsing and the earth was splitting apart. Moreover, at this moment, purple cloud was outside. The space in the area seemed to have turned into a lightning ocean. The person who was being targeted was Lu Bian. He didn't expect that Zhang Yan would actually be able to find him. Amidst his shock, he hurriedly used all his divine abilities. He protected his body. However, he was a step too slow. The high sky lightning had already exploded by his side. It instantly shook his spiritual opportunity and he nearly fell off the cloud. The lesser 5 elements devil-slaying divine thunder just happened to arrive at this moment, and this time, it completely bombarded his body. Because he did not have any defensive treasures, not only was his protective divine ability broken by the lightning, his conjured body was also beaten until it became illusory, like a candle in the wind. At this moment, Zhang Yan used 2 swords to attack. This round of attacks came one after another and he didn't give his opponent any breathing space at all. However, at this moment, there was also a burst of light outside his body. This was the other few people who saw that he was focused on fighting Taoist Lu, so they took the opportunity to attack him secretly. However, Zhang Yan didn't care about the attacks from the others. He charged forward with the sword gleam and cut Taoist Lu into dozens of pieces. Taoist Lu instantly exploded into a cloud of murky air. The magic slip spun and sucked in a lot of murky air. However, the remaining qi dynamics suddenly turned into countless dry bones and scattered. When Zhang Yan saw the scene, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. This person was obviously killed by the sword weapon, but he could clearly feel that the wisp of qi dynamic was still there. It seemed that he wasn't really dead. However, he didn't have time to think about it now. Under his control, the magic slip let out a clear sound and flew to another place. This time, the person it was looking for was Taoist Huan. When this person saw what happened to Taoist Lu, even though he knew that he had the 100 lives picture and could condense it later, he couldn't help but feel afraid. Fortunately, the escape technique of the cultivators of Hunqing sect was not bad. He immediately used his escape technique and turned into a wisp of gray smoke, wanting to escape somewhere else. A cold light appeared in Zhang Yan's eyes. He raised his hand and pointed. Thousands of purple heaven thunderbolts were immediately attracted from the sky. With a loud bang, they instantly shattered. Just now, because he didn't know where his opponent was, the battle had been delayed until now. However, once he found a way to find him, even if he wasn't under the cover of the purple heaven thundernet, it wouldn't take much effort for him to kill this group of people who hadn't cultivated their nascent embryo. The remaining 4 people immediately felt that something was wrong. Zhang Yan could actually find where they were. Didn't that mean that they had lost their biggest advantage? Xin Yu saw that he had killed 2 people in a short period of time. His pupils shrank, but he was still calm. He said loudly, "The situation is not right. Everyone, don't have any thoughts of retreating. If you do, you will only be killed one by one. With the bone insect's treasure, we can only fight him with our lives. I don't believe that he can fight us alone." After he finished speaking, he shook his body and turned into tens of thousands of demons. At the same time, his body swayed and he hid inside, making it impossible for others to see if he was real or fake. However, he knew that under this lightning, no matter how he hid, it was useless. He was only using his body to attract the lightning to create an opportunity for the 3 people behind him to die together with the enemy. However, the demon slip let out a clear hum and turned into a ray of light that went straight to where the real body was. As for the tens of thousands of demons, it didn't pay any attention to it. Zhang Yan's gaze shifted. Under the illumination of the light, he saw that other than the figure that was flying over, there were many blurry things that looked like demons. He immediately recognized that these people were cultivators of the Netherworld Spring sect. At this moment, he vaguely sensed through the discrimination stone that there were 3 strands of qi activity moving about indeterminately outside. Their momentum seemed ordinary, but there was a surging undercurrent faintly within them, and it seemed as if it could sweep up monstrous waves at any time. With his rich battle experience, he only needed to think for a moment to figure out the intentions of these people. However, he didn't deliberately change his method. He still pointed out with his finger, causing the lightning to strike down. Xin Yu knew that under these tens of thousands of lightning bolts, there was no chance of him getting lucky. Thus, he gave up resisting, and his entire body was instantly submerged in the endless wave of lightning. As for the tens of thousands of demons, with the death of their master, they instantly became extremely scattered. They had just come over when they were swept away by a monstrous wave, and half of them were left. At this moment, Xiu Fengrui and the other 2 saw an opportunity, and they suddenly activated all the Fa Li in their bodies. They wanted to display a divine ability that could destroy both good and bad, regardless of the cost. However, at this moment, a ray of light first flashed in front of them, and the 3 figures were found one by one. Then, they saw a large hand reach out from the clouds below, and with a force that could split the heavens and split the earth, it slapped towards them. This hand wasn't formed from a divine ability, nor was it condensed from law force. It was truly a large hand. Compared to this hand, the 3 of them were really as insignificant as flies. Unless they released their Dharma forms, they would be able to match it. However, before they could do anything, the large hand had already smashed into their bodies. Boom! With just an explosion, the 3 of them were instantly dispersed into turbid air that filled the air. The 9 absorption devil slip let out a joyful cry and rushed forward to devour without restraint. However, just like Taoist Lu just now, when it swallowed half of the slip, countless broken bones rained down, and the chi of these people didn't seem to be broken, nor did it seem to be completely exhausted. Zhang Yan snorted coldly. If it was just 1 or 2 people, it would be fine, but all of them were like this. There was clearly some other trick involved, perhaps some kind of death substitution technique. However, the turbid air that was sucked into the slip was real. Even if these people really didn't die, if they dared to appear in front of him again, he would just kill them again. With a turn of his mind, he pulled himself up and continued to grow until he was more than 10,000 feet tall. Just now he stopped. At this moment, he stood there like a towering mountain. As long as the cultivators did not release their Dharma forms, they would not be able to fight against his current body. After about 10 breaths, Taoist Lu was the first to be sent out by the 100 Lives illustration. Now that his Dharma power had recovered, he was about to pull himself together and go forward, but there was a flash of light in front of him. Before he could react, everything was chaotic again. Zhang Yan retracted his hand with a calm expression on his face. From now on, no matter where someone came out, as long as the devil's subduing slip pointed out a direction, he would stretch out his hand and either slap or crush them to death. With the abilities of the 6 people, even if there was a huge difference in strength between the 2 sides, they should not have been so weak. However, before they could even use their abilities, they were killed. Among them, 5 were completely killed by him after experiencing 3 defeats. Only Lien Yitong, the sect leader of the Bonin sect, was killed by him 10 times in a row, but he still kept coming out. However, Lien Yitong knew that he was definitely going to die. Spiritual opportunity could not be obtained out of thin air. The 100 Lives illustration was known as the 100 Lives illustration, but the spiritual opportunity hidden in it would also be used up one day. Based on his estimation, it was already his limit to be able to die 10 times in place of others. However, even if he knew that, he would not be able to break free, and he could not even escape. He could only wait for death. After Zhang Yan killed this person for the 15th time, he felt the space around him shake, as if something had shattered. He paused for a moment and raised his head to look. Unknowingly, the white fog above him had already dispersed. Chapter 12:14. Once the 6 of them died, not only did the 100 Lives in corpse diagram appear, even the muddy ground white in stone that no one was controlling had returned to its original form, and it had even turned into a large boulder that was around 70 to 80 feet tall. Zhang Yan thought for a while, then rolled up his sleeves and kept the 2 treasures of the sect. At this time, the 9 suctions devil slip had already swallowed all the impure chi in the area. As he willed it, it turned into a wisp of clear light and returned to his body. He carefully examined it. There was still a lot of essence chi left in the devil slip. Although he had collected a lot of essence chi, it was not enough to push him to the 6th transformation realm. However, the essence chi and spiritual opportunity of the devil sect cultivators were the most useful for this strength path cultivation method. If he included the demon locusts and other things that he had yet to throw in, the gap was not as big as he had imagined. However, the 1st and 2nd stage devil sect cultivators were not worth his time. Only the nascent embryo cultivators were comparable to ordinary grotto heavens with just a clone, not to mention that their true body was even better. The next person he was going to kill should be such a person. Among the 6 devil sects, there were 3 nascent embryo cultivators. He could sense their locations one by one. At this moment, the person closest to this space was impressively in the area where the 2 sides were fighting the most fiercely. However, this person's aura had disappeared along with Chi Hongchan's aura just now. He had either escaped into the grotto heavens or used some magic treasure to go to a place that was similar to the void realm. Nascent embryo cultivators would not die so easily. Whether it was for the big picture or to achieve his own goal, going there was the first choice. After killing this person, if there was still a lack of essence chi, then he would find the next one until he had killed enough. After making up his mind, he rode his sword and flew in that direction at top speed. Up in the sky, Reverend Kang Zheng and Reverend Meng were confronting each other. They had been fighting for a long time, but whether it was in terms of cultivation base, magic power or Taoist techniques, both of them were inferior to each other. They were very close, and neither could completely suppress the other in a short period of time. Because they knew that there would be no result if this went on, the two of them retreated and waited for the opportunity to emerge. Jinren Kongjing thought to himself. He was hoping that after Fang Shuntong defeated Qi Hongchan, Fang Shuntong would come out and join forces with him. That way, it wouldn't be difficult to suppress Fang Shuntong. As for Meng Zhen, he could sense that the four seas were getting closer and closer. They would arrive in an hour at most. As long as he could drag this out, his dharma would merge with the water of the four seas, and his battle prowess would increase exponentially. Even if Fang Shuntong won the battle between Qi and Fang, he would still be able to defeat the two of them, and it was even possible that he would be defeated. But if something were to happen, he touched the sleeve inside. He might have to use this when the time came. Since Wu Yunbi's death, the cultivators on both sides below remained motionless. The two of them had already stopped fighting and retreated far away. In the previous few rounds of attacks, almost everyone had disregarded the consequences and poured out their mana in an attempt to kill their opponent. After so many rounds, it could be said that they had used up a lot of their mana. In addition, the two nascent foundation cultivators on both sides were not in the array. Even if they attacked together now, they would not be able to kill a heavenly abode cultivator of the same generation. Therefore, they were all trying to adjust their qi. They were trying to recover their mana as soon as possible. Ran Xiushu transmitted her voice to Feng Xianzhao. Sage Feng, who do you think will win? Feng Xianzhao was also considering this question. He said, although Fang Shuntong has cultivated his nascent foundation for a long time, after reaching the third stage, his mana has stopped increasing. His magic power is no longer increasing, and his cultivation should be similar to sect leader Qi's. However, Blood Soul Sect's Blood God Waterfall is an offensive item, and it can create countless blood souls. Sect leader Qi's treasure looks like it can only move space, so it might not be able to block it. Ran Xiushu said, doesn't sect leader Qi also have over 700 pagoda spirits? It looks like there is no end to them, and they are not afraid of filth. They do not seem to lose to Fang Shuntong by much. Feng Xianzhao judged calmly, I also hope that sect leader Qi can defeat this person. However, I heard that sect leader Qi has found the pagoda suppression pearl not long ago, so it will not be easy for him to use it as he wishes. On the contrary, the Blood God Waterfall has been in Fang Shuntong's hands for at least 1,000 years. Even if he can't control it as he wishes, he should be able to use it without any problems. Moreover, I heard that if this blood soul can devour a cultivator's soul and spiritual vigor, its power will increase to another level. I hope that sect leader Qi can protect yourself. After hearing this, Ran Xiushu did not show any signs of fear. She only snorted and said self-deprecatingly, it is indeed a great calamity. If I'm not careful, I will die. It seems that the burial ground is out of control. As the two were talking, suddenly, both sides felt an inexplicable change in the world. Jinren Kongjing's expression changed abruptly. He realized that the fate energy on his side was falling uncontrollably. In his senses, the turbid spiritual vigor that was originally spread all over the void had suddenly decreased by 5 or 6 strands. He understood what this meant. This meant that the 6 major sects had suffered a crushing defeat in one of the void spaces. Under the technique of shifting feathers and counting victory, Yuxiao School and its allies had been determined to be the side that was about to lose. If there was no other way to salvage the situation, then within 100 breaths, all of them would be killed by the Xian technique. However, since this technique was released by Yuxiao School, how could they not take precautions beforehand? With a thought, a jade talisman from his sleeve naturally slid into his palm. This talisman was a talisman that Master Lingya had given him in advance. If the situation was unfavorable, it could delay the activation of this technique. But even so, every hour 1 or 2 people on their side would be killed by Xian technique. And as for who would suffer the calamity, it was completely uncertain. It could be anyone beside him, or it could be the cultivators of his allies who were still fighting with him, or it could even be himself. Under the power of this technique, the nascent soul cultivators were no different from the others. However, this was still better than being wiped out in one fell swoop. It was not impossible to reverse the situation. If Fang Shantong could defeat Qi Hongchan, with the combined strength of him and this person, they might be able to kill Meng Jida. They might even be able to kill all the people on the Qinsong side. Then, not only would they be able to escape from danger, they could even turn defeat into victory. With a thought, he used all his strength and crushed the jade talisman. The people on the Yuxiao side had also sensed that something was wrong and were panicking. However, suddenly, they were surprised to find that the qi that was being continuously cut suddenly stopped, as if it had stopped falling again. They couldn't help but have the thought of escaping after the calamity. In a space, the Qinsong school elder Peng Wenyin was in a precarious situation. At this moment, she was dealing with the joint attack of Yuan Yang sect's Master Wen and Master Fu, as well as Wu Fenggu. If there were only 2 people, she was confident that she could handle it, but with 3 people attacking, she felt that it was difficult to resist. Fortunately, she had the rainbow treasure robe that Su Mo had left for her. Relying on this item to defend, she was able to maintain her undefeated state. However, up until now, the brilliance on the treasure robe had decreased by more than half. If this continued, sooner or later, the treasure would shatter and she would die. But at this moment, the entire world seemed to stop for a moment. Master Wen's body turned cold. At this moment, she felt that a great disaster was about to befall her. Her beautiful eyes widened as she looked at Master Fu in fear. She stretched out her hand and said, "Save." On the other hand, he hadn't even finished saying the word when his body seemed to have shattered like glass, and strands of fine cracks had appeared on it. Master Fu's face turned pale with fright. He didn't care that he was in the middle of a battle and hurriedly came over. He stretched out his hand and tried to transfer the primordial essence into her body. However, just now, when he touched the fingertip, Master Wen's entire body started to shatter bit by bit. With a look of despair on her face, she turned into a pile of debris, and with a gust of wind, she completely dissipated. Master Fu watched her die, but he was unable to save her. He stood there in a daze and didn't move for a long time. When Peng Wenyin saw this scene, her heart was also shaken. However, she could feel that her qi was rising. With a thought, she knew why. Her spirit was lifted. Since the other party was already down by 1 person, and Master Fu was distracted because of the death of his Dao companion, she still had a chance in this battle. Thus, with a shout, 10,000 feet of red light surged out from behind her. She immediately launched a counterattack against the 2 of them. Jinren Kongjing waited for a long time and realized that no one around him had died. He knew that this disaster must have been passed by someone else. He nodded subconsciously. In his opinion, as long as they weren't disciples of Yuxiao school, it didn't matter if they died. At least for the next 2 hours, his place would be safe. Moreover, he hadn't witnessed the scene of people dying for no reason. Moreover, the people here wouldn't be distracted if they didn't witness the scene of people dying for no reason. After waiting for another moment, the hidden appearance spiritual pagoda started to tremble slightly. A ray of light seemed to penetrate the void and shone straight into the void. Everyone's expression tensed up. It was obvious that the outcome of the battle between the 2 masters was about to be decided. In just a few breaths, there was a rumbling sound and a ray of blood light rushed out. At the same time, the smell of blood spread out. There were 10 figures standing on the blood wave, and they all looked the same. Fang Shantong walked out from his 9 clones and said, "Taoist Kongjing, sorry to keep you waiting." When the cultivators on Yuxiao's side saw this, they were all overjoyed. On the Qinsong school's side, everyone's hearts sank. They were facing 2 Yuan feather cultivators, and one of them had 9 clones. How were they going to fight this battle? I'm afraid that everyone here will be annihilated today. All of them stopped their cultivation and stood up, preparing for the final battle. Fang Shantong swept his gaze across the battlefield, his eyes filled with killing intent. He said, "It's a pity that Qi Hongchan escaped into the world within a world, and I wasn't able to devour him. However, I destroyed 6 of his clones and heavily injured him, so I'm not afraid of him coming out to cause trouble again. Now, I can kill all of these people in front of me and use their essence to sacrifice to my blood waterfall." However, just as he was about to gather his Fa and rush out, he seemed to have sensed something. His body stopped and he suddenly raised his head to look at the sky. Zhenren Kongjing and Meng Zhen also sensed something, and they looked in the same direction simultaneously. There was a flash of spiritual light, and a sharp rainbow brazenly tore the sky apart, charging in. Then the rainbow light dispersed, and a young Taoist wearing a black robe stepped on black smoke with sword light revolving around his body. He slowly walked in. "Taoist Zhang? Zhang Yan? Palace Master Zhang." Meng Zhen's expression relaxed slightly, and he slowly let go of the item in his sleeve. When Zhenren Kongjing saw him, his expression became unusually serious. On the other hand, the people on Yu Xiao's side were all extremely nervous, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Ran Xiushu laughed, dusted her sleeves, and said in a relaxed manner, "Looks like we don't have to die." Zhang Yan nodded at the people on the Qinsong school's side, then looked at Fang Shuntong. When he saw that Fang Shuntong had 9 clones lingering outside, his eyes flashed, and he said calmly, "Sect Master Fang, you're very good. I didn't come looking for you in vain." As soon as he finished speaking, there was a rumble, and a huge hand that covered the sky came crashing down. Chapter 12:15. Fang Shuntong saw that Zhang Yan was coming for him, but he didn't dare to be careless. The opponent had 2 killing swords, and he had already killed a nascent soul spiritual master. His battle experience was probably unparalleled among his peers. However, as the head of the Blood Soul sect, he also had 2 killing swords. One was the soul-seeking blood blade, the other was the soul-stealing blade. Other than that, he also had the sect's treasure, the blood god waterfall as his shield, and his mana was endless. Not to mention, he also had the 9 clones behind him, so he didn't need to be afraid. He shouted, and a large amount of blood water was drawn from the blood god waterfall. With a spell, it turned into a large scarlet hand. The 5 fingers were dripping with blood, and it carried a thick stench of blood. It was raised up, and it collided with Zhang Yan's large hand. When the 2 palms collided, the force of the collision spread out and spread far away. On the way, the mountains were crushed, and the ravines were flattened. Under this shock, the few continents that were left were all shattered. The cultivators on both sides also felt like the sky and earth were turning upside down, as if even this space was going to collapse. Seeing that the mana of the 2 was so strong, to avoid being affected, everyone retreated outwards. After Meng Zhen left the battlefield, he didn't look at the battlefield. He deeply believed that with Zhang Yan's ability in fighting, this battle would be won in the end. At this moment, he only needed to watch Zhenren Kongjing and not let him attack. Not only him, the cultivators on the side of Qinsong also watched the opponent, not letting him act rashly. When Zhang Yan's palm pressed down, he realized that Fang Shuntong's mana was far stronger than anyone he had fought before. Even Yuan Yang's head Chu Rui was far inferior. After the 3rd level of the nascent soul cultivator, their mana would no longer grow. This person either had a strong foundation, or he broke through the 6th level when he was at the 2nd level. Although the opponent's foundation was not as strong as his, it wasn't easy to crush the opponent with pure mana. However, other than his chi path cultivation, he was still at the 5th rank of strength path. If he fought head-on, even a nascent soul cultivator wouldn't be able to block him. He immediately increased his strength by 30%. The blood hand was also extraordinary. By relying on the blood waterfall to continuously replenish itself, it did not scatter under this pressure. Even so, it was slowly being suppressed, and it looked like it was about to be unable to endure any longer. Fang Shuntong's expression changed slightly. He was someone who had broken through 7 barriers. Even among nascent core cultivators, there were few who could compare. Although he knew that Zhang Yan's magic power was vigorous, he didn't think he was weak either. He wanted to see if he could suppress this person, but who would have thought that in a head-on collision he wouldn't be a match? From the looks of it, it was his own Dharma idol. Similarly, he wouldn't be able to gain any advantages. Moreover, the space here was narrow, so he could really do that. But he couldn't relax them. He immediately realized that he couldn't continue to compete with her anymore. With the support of the blood waterfall, he was not afraid of his opponent suppressing him once, but after 10 or 100 times, his advantage would continue to be magnified. Once he was forced to a point where he could no longer turn around, it was very likely that he would not even have the chance to gather his mana again. He would be killed by the other party. Since I can't gain the upper hand in terms of mana, then I can only compete with this person in terms of techniques and abilities. Thinking about that, he didn't persist. Once the mana here was cut off, the blood hand instantly collapsed into a sky full of blood water. Most of it scattered back into the blood waterfall while a small portion turned into a blood rain. It floated in all directions, looking like it was spreading through the air. Zhang Yan's eyes squinted. He could sense that there was something weird about the blood rain. Back then, Bailey Qingyin had used the blood rain to display the technique of borrowing object to substitute form, forcing the head disciple of the three sects into a sorry state. If this person used the same technique on the cultivators of the Dark Azure sect, however, he wouldn't be easy to deal with. Moreover, the timing he chose was ingenious. He was a nascent core cultivator. If he were to use this move right from the start, everyone would be on their guard, not allowing any loopholes to be exploited. However, if he accidentally spilled some during the battle, he might let down his guard. With the demon sect's cunning methods, if he wasn't careful, it would contaminate his body. Thus, he warned, "Fellow Taoists, be careful." At the same time he spoke, he didn't delay in his attack. He circulated his Fa Li, causing the palm that was pressing down to expand once more, and it was already more than a few times larger than before. It covered the location of the blood waterfall with the momentum of covering the sky. Mu Shoshan looked around and said in a low voice, "Everyone be careful. Distinguish between reality and illusion. Don't get stained by the blood rain." Everyone from the Qinsong school understood what he meant. The demon sect had the ability to change between reality and illusion. The blood rain in front of them might not be real, but what they didn't see might not be non-existent. Therefore, they all used their artifacts or techniques to protect themselves. Not only them, but the people from the Yuxiao school also seemed to be fearful of the blood rain. They also avoided it and didn't dare to get close. As for Meng Zhen and Jinren Kangjing, they didn't move from their original spot. With their artifacts and techniques to protect themselves, they weren't afraid of the blood rain at all. Even if it really landed on them, they would be refined in an instant. Fang Shuntong pondered, "Have we been seen through?" However, he didn't care. It would be best if the blood rain could stain the cultivators from the Qinsong school. If it couldn't, it wouldn't be a big deal. Since the blood rain could stain others, it could stain himself as well. His spirit moved and the blood spirits flew out from the blood waterfall. They came up to bathe in the blood rain. The blood spirits in the blood waterfall were endless. However, he understood that while the blood spirits might be useful against others, against Zhang Yan, they were like moths flying into a flame. It was a waste of his mana. Therefore, he didn't plan on using them to fight. He only used them as a substitute for death. In this way, even if he was hit by a spell or a divine ability, or a fatal wound, these blood spirits could take it for him. It was just that it was a little inappropriate for them to gather in one place. It was very likely that the opponent would get rid of them all in one fell swoop and break this technique. Therefore, he immediately ordered them to scatter in all directions. As long as they were within the range of his senses, the divine ability would be effective. Zhang Yan stood in the clouds and saw this scene clearly. How could he not know what he was planning? If he succeeded, then any attack that came down would be meaningless. His gaze flickered. The North Dark Sword hovered by his side and didn't move. Outside him, the clear swan swords had already flown out one by one, as if they wanted to go up and kill those blood spirits. Fang Shuntong sneered to himself. With the blood god waterfall, the blood spirits couldn't be killed. If one was destroyed, he could just summon another. And his plan didn't stop there. Those blood spirits were born from the blood god waterfall, and they had the ability to contaminate themselves. If he killed one, he would be stained with a trace of blood that couldn't be washed away. Even if it didn't pose much of a hindrance to the sword of slaughter for the time being, when it accumulated, it would definitely harm its nature and weaken the treasure's light, causing its power to drop greatly. At that time, his 2 true blades of slaughter would have a place of use. The rays of sword light flew swiftly and caught up to the blood souls. However, right when they were about to come into contact with the blood souls, countless bolts of lightning suddenly shot out from the void and instantly blasted apart the dozens of blood souls. Not a single one remained. With Zhang Yan's experience in fighting, he could naturally see that there might be other mysteries within these blood spirits. Therefore, he didn't directly use his sword to kill them, but instead used Qingxian's soaring thunder shock. Although this technique could be used to attack the enemy through the void, when facing hundreds of targets at the same time, he couldn't guarantee that he would hit all of them. Therefore, he first used the sword light to open up a path, to affect the qi, and then to attract the lightning over, so that he could accurately land his attack. When Fang Shuntong saw how easily he broke through these blood spirits, his expression couldn't help but change. He looked up into the sky. The big hand was getting closer and closer, the light above his head was covered. It looked like it had the power to envelop the entire space. At that moment, he had 2 choices. One was to avoid the attack, retreat far away, and fight again. The other was to stay and think of a way to use his divine arts again, to directly dissolve this attack. Almost without any hesitation, he chose the latter. Firstly, he could see that Zhang Yan's palm was extremely powerful, and the mana used was not small. If it didn't hit, he would have a chance to counterattack. Secondly, Zhang Yan could be considered as half a sword cultivator. Once he retreated, there would be countless of sword lights attacking him on the way, let alone the fact that the opponent had more than one killing sword. If it was a normal day with the blood transformation escape technique, he would naturally not be afraid, but with the blood god waterfall, how could he retreat so quickly? As the saying goes, there must be a loss. Although this sect guarding treasure provided him with endless mana and many divine arts, it also made him unable to use that incomparably fast escape technique. But then again, the sect guarding treasure was usually only used when the enemy attacked the mountain gate. At that time, it was already a matter of life and death, and the person who refined this treasure back then naturally wouldn't think about how to escape. He shook his sleeve again, and another 10 blood spirits flew out, bathing in the blood rain, and then flew out again. It wasn't that he was unwilling to fail and wanted to try again, but he wanted to use this to temporarily restrain the Qinghong sword light. As for the 2 killing blades on him, he didn't want to use them until the northern underworld heavenly sword fell. When the sword light above chased after him again, he urged the 9 clones behind him into the sky, and went up to bear the blood rain. They weren't comparable to the blood spirits, and each of them was comparable to a heaven's true master. They weren't something that could be broken with a simple thunder technique. If these clones didn't break, he would have 9 more lives. After the 9 clones got the sky dome, they each used their divine arts and spells. First, they worked together to form a blood cocoon sky screen, which was to defend against the all heavens united divine water forbidden light. After doing this, they used blood time thunder at the same time and attacked Zhang Yan. This was equivalent to the attack of 9 heavens true masters working together. Under normal circumstances, when faced with such a method, almost no one of the same generation could block it. Fang Shuntong didn't expect to kill Zhang Yan with this, but even if it didn't work, he could force him to stop. In the battle matrix, if one side retreated, it meant that the other side advanced. When this palm came, it could be said to be earth-shattering. If he was forced to retreat without achieving anything, not only would his spiritual power be wasted, his momentum would also suffer a heavy blow. Zhang Yan's gaze suddenly became extremely deep. Even if he summoned the heaven and earth leaf, such an attack would be broken in one hit, so he didn't do so. Instead, he exerted force again, and the big hand fell down at a faster speed than just now. He actually went all out to attack, and didn't have the slightest intention of retreating to defend. Chapter 12:16. Because Fang Shun and the 9 avatars were telepathically connected and came from the same source, their attacks were even more methodical. As soon as the blood red and Yin lightning shot out, they almost immediately converged into a vast river of blood that covered half the sky and rushed up. Because the thick blood energy spread in all directions, the Grotto Heaven cultivators on both sides didn't want to get involved, so they retreated a little. Although Zhang Yan didn't take out the Heaven and Earth leaf, it didn't mean that he gave up on defending. A 5-colored light flashed behind him, and instantly a yellow light rose up. This layer of Earth element true light was extremely thick, but after being hit by the blood river, it didn't last long. In just 3 to 4 breaths, it collapsed. However, after this attack, the blood river didn't come out unscathed. It looked like it was weakened by a little. Zhang Yan commanded with his mind again. Among the 5 lights, there was a blazing flame that shot through the sky and went against the blood river. The sky was dyed red. The filthy blood was sinister, and it was most afraid of this kind of lightning and fire technique. Instantly, 40% of it was wiped out, but the rest was still coming. At this moment, a layer of glass-like barrier was released from his body. He had taken out the mysterious rotating heavenly net wall. The moment the river of blood rushed into it, it was constantly being moved away, as if it had fallen into another space. But even so, because the momentum was too great, even though a lot of the front was shaved off, it still exceeded the limit that the heavenly net wall could contain. In just a few breaths of time, it shattered and transformed into specks of light. Zhang Yan's expression was calm. After passing through layers upon layers of obstructions, the entire river of blood had already reached the end of its tether. He circulated his mana, and a layer of baleful aura appeared around his body. He allowed the river of blood to crash into him, but when it reached his body, it seemed to have fallen into nothingness. They all disappeared. When Fang Shuntong saw the combined attack of the 9 doppelgangers, the opponent actually didn't use any treasures, and only relied on divine arts to block it. He immediately knew that he had used the wrong strategy. He thought to himself, "This is because I didn't think it through. If I just pressed forward like this, I might be able to win against others." However, this person's magic power is tyrannical, and he has been through hundreds of battles, so it's basically difficult to shake him. We need to use a variety of methods to have a chance of victory. Many doppelgangers combined their strength to launch an attack. The power was not small, but because the method was too simple, it lacked variation, and the opponent's magic power was tyrannical. Only then was he able to easily break it. Knowing his mistake, he immediately changed his method. At his command, the 9 clones attacked again. This time, it was different from the last time. Even though it was still the blood-light lightning, it was split into several parts. Some were before and some were after, some were fake and some were real. There was also a difference in strength. As for his true body, he sat still and did not participate in the battle. The Dark North Heavenly Sword was pointed at him from afar, and he believed that if there was a chance, it would definitely land at the first instant. At that time, he would have to use his 2 blades to fight. However, this kind of battle wasn't able to directly determine the outcome of the battle, and it would also restrict his ability for nothing. Thus, he could only suppress it and not make a move, so that he could deal with any sudden changes at any time. Zhang Yan saw that while the opponent's attack was scattered, he still had to deal with it. However, it was more troublesome than last time. If he persisted in not withdrawing his magic power, it would definitely take up more of his energy. However, that was when he was alone. Now that he had the visible Yang spirit body and the doppelganger, it was naturally easy to deal with. He called out in his heart, and the 2 doppelgangers walked out, each using their path techniques to block the incoming attacks. This time, it was easier than last time. When Fang Shuntong saw this, not only was he not disappointed, he was instead excited. He thought to himself, "This person hasn't cultivated a Yuanfu yet, and one of them should be a visible Yang spirit body. To be able to do this, he has to use at least 50% or more of his magic power. This is a chance. If I can break it, I can take away half of this person's strength. Then no matter how we fight, he won't be my match." Finding a flaw in the enemy, of course he wouldn't easily let it go. However, it wasn't easy to do so. He looked up and quickly judged that there were only 2 to 3 breaths left before the hand would land on his head. At most, he only had one chance to attack. But one attack definitely wouldn't be able to threaten the opponent, so he had to delay it a little. With a thought, one of the doppelgangers in the sky used a spell and pointed. A blood rainbow sliced across the sky, and it seemed like a wound had appeared in the sky. The speed at which the hand was descending suddenly slowed down a bit. In reality, it wasn't that it became slow, but that under the power of the technique, the distance between the two was enlarged, such that it had to travel more. This technique was called 1,000 Mountains 10,000 Layers, and only the sect leader of Blood Soul sect could cultivate it. It was a top technique for protecting one's life. If it was used with the blood transformation escape technique, as long as the timing was right, pretty much no one could hurt him. However, due to the blood god waterfall, Fang Shuntong could only use this to buy time and gain more chances to attack. He calculated once more. Right now, he could attack 3 to 4 times. If he couldn't force back or kill Zhang Yan within these few times, then he would have to face that monstrous palm head-on. Fortunately, he had 9 doppelgangers to die in his place. Even if he failed, he would be able to survive. But this time, before he could make a move, Zhang Yan's avatar had already flicked his sleeves. Fog rose in all directions, and drops of heavy black water rolled out. Then they fell down one by one. Among them, there was Xianming heavy water and abyssal heavy water. It was already difficult to distinguish them, and if they fell together, it would be even more difficult to judge. If he was hit by the abyssal heavy water, it wouldn't take much. Just a few drops would be enough to shatter the blood god waterfall along with Fang Shuntong. No spell could stop it. Fang Shuntong didn't dare to let his guard down. The doppelgangers above him suddenly split up. 8 of them continuously performed their techniques to pressure Zhang Yan, while the last one returned to the blood god waterfall and grabbed a handful of blood water. He sprinkled it into the sky and turned it into a crimson flame. Wisps of it floated away and soon reached the sky, forming a blood mist between the two. The heavy water inevitably passed through the blood mist. Instantly, a lot of Xianming heavy water was corroded by the filthy blood qi and shrunk slightly. However, the abyssal heavy water was not affected. It was actually not damaged at all. Fang Shuntong sneered. There was indeed something strange, but he still noticed it. However, when he looked carefully, his expression changed. He almost subconsciously had the urge to escape. It was actually the abyssal heavy water. This water could be used to suppress heavenly demons. It could be said to be extremely heavy. He had no doubt that once this water fell on his Dharmakaya, it would be enough to crush all the essence and spiritual opportunity in his body. Even if he had the death substitution technique, the blood god waterfall below him could not be moved. Even if it did not dissipate, he would definitely be severely injured. He heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he discovered it in time. Otherwise, he would definitely suffer a great loss. With Zhang Yan's ability, once he had the upper hand, he would not be given any chance to turn defeat into victory. At this moment, he was very glad that he had performed the 1,000 Mountains technique just now, which gave him time to deal with this threat. With a sweep of his gaze, at least 3 drops of abyssal heavy water were rushing towards him. It was absolutely impossible to block them, but it was not difficult to make them deviate slightly. However, he had to worry about Zhang Yan and the possibility of obstructing him from performing the technique. Therefore, he had to be prepared in advance. Although he was thinking, his movements did not delay because of this. Among the 9 clones, one of them rushed out and successively performed the immeasurable interchange technique. This technique allowed him to exchange 2 items, and it was originally used to move mountains, replant the soil, and construct an abode. It was completely not a battle divine ability, but when he utilized it here, he obtained a miraculous effect. Even though he was still unable to exchange for a miraculous object like the deep pit water, he could rely on the strength of the 2 items to affect each other, and thus deviate from the distance. Most importantly, it didn't consume much magic energy. Seeing that the heavy water deviated slightly, Fang Shuntong was also satisfied. He had always believed that there was no difference in strength between techniques and techniques. As long as it was used properly in battle, it could similarly subdue the enemy and obtain victory. Zhang Yan saw that he broke the technique so easily, but he did not care. He did not expect to rely on a few drops of heavy water to kill Fang Shuntong. His real killer move was only in this palm. This attack was not as simple as it looked on the surface. It was the combination of qi and strength. As long as it was within a certain distance, it could produce boundless traction force and firmly suppress the opponent's body. It was impossible to escape. No matter how many death substitution techniques he had, or how many clones he had, he could crush them all with one palm. At this moment, he kept giving the opponent opportunities to attack, and even took the initiative to reveal flaws. He wanted to firmly attract the opponent, and when the time came, even if the opponent wanted to escape, he would not be able to. At this moment, both Qin Song and Yu Xiao's people were attracted by the battle. On the surface, it seemed that it was just a simple palm from Zhang Yan, but around this attack, the two sides made several changes to counter each other. Every time there was a method that was broken, and every time there was a method to counter it. On the surface, what was seen was only a part of it. There were even more hidden plans that could not be seen. Although there were many Grotto Heaven cultivators here, before they met today, there were only a few who had the experience of fighting against people of the same generation. Putting themselves in their shoes, if they were to face any one of them, they would probably be defeated in a few breaths, or even die. After Fang Shuntong launched 2 more attacks, he finally found an opportunity. It was the moment before the big hand fell. He believed that at this time, if Zhang Yan did not stop, he had more than an 80% chance of getting rid of the obvious Yang clone. Thus, with a low roar, he circulated his mana. This time, not only did the 9 clones move, even he himself moved. Almost at the same time, the mana on Zhang Yan's big hand had been brewed to the extreme. At this moment, he had an inexplicable feeling. What divine power, what Dao technique, in front of this incomparable power, it was all fake. Ever since he entered the second stage, there were very few opponents who could make him use his full strength. Because he did not need to use this much strength to suppress the opponent. Chu Rui was one, and Fang Shuntong was another. At this moment, the big hand was very close to the opponent. Without any hesitation, he gathered all the mana in his body and pressed down. In an instant, the world turned upside down. Chapter 12:17. The huge hand contained the divine abilities of qi and strength. At this moment, when Zhang Yan executed it with his full strength, the space around him collapsed, and the Thousand Mountains technique was instantly unable to endure it and was forcefully destroyed. As such, the speed of its descent was a little faster than before. When 2 cultivators with similar abilities fight, the slightest change can determine the outcome of the battle. If one doesn't have a unique technique, the slightest mistake can result in the loss of the entire battle. Fang Shuntong was currently encountering such a situation, but this sudden change had deviated from his judgment, and the result of this was very likely that before he could even break through Zhang Yan's Yang spirit body, he would be struck by the big hand. However, with his ability, it wouldn't be difficult for him to retreat now. But once this thought appeared, it was immediately extinguished. If he gave up now, not only would he lose the opportunity that he found with great difficulty, but he would also fall into a very passive situation. Not only that, it also represented that he had completely lost to Zhang Yan in the previous round of counterattacks and calculations. How could he tolerate this? As a sect leader, he cared a lot about his face. Naturally, if he really was at the point of life and death, he wouldn't fight to the end. However, he had 9 doppelgangers to die for him, so he didn't have to be afraid. Therefore, he coldly grunted and continued to follow his previous path. He used his technique and ordered all his doppelgangers to attack his target. Zhang Yan's palm had swept away all obstacles in its path. There were no more obstructions, and it came crashing down with the force of 10,000 mountains. Just at the moment when it was about to hit Fang Shuntong, it suddenly exploded with an incomparably powerful pulling force. At this moment, all the spectators, including Reverend Meng and Reverend Kang Zheng, who were both nascent soul cultivators, felt an inexplicable force on the giant hand that was about to pull them over. Everyone hurriedly formed hand seals and stabilized themselves. However, apart from the two nascent soul cultivators and Mu Shoshan, the rest of the people on the field swayed slightly. Everyone's heart trembled. Even they felt this way, let alone the person closest to them. Fang Xuantong's expression suddenly changed. He had thought that he would be able to withstand the palm, but now he realized that there was a powerful suction force within the palm, as if it wanted to devour and mince him into pieces. If he was held up by this palm, not to mention the 9 clones, even if he had a few more, he would still not be able to withstand it. He reacted quickly and immediately gave up. He formed hand seals and tried to enter the paradise. If it was anyone else, they might need to cultivate for a while, but his magical powers were profound and he had broken through the 7th gate. With just a thought, he could send himself in. But just as lightning burst out of his body and his whole body became faintly discernible. However, his expression changed again and he immediately stopped. With a serious look in his eyes, he said, "The surrounding void has shattered. If I continue, not only will I not be able to return to the heavenly abode, I might even be forced to enter the mirage." At this moment of life and death, he quickly calculated. At this moment, the situation had changed greatly. Even if they killed Zhang Yan's clone, it wouldn't be able to threaten his life. Instead, he might lose his life. Thus, he could only give up on this plan. What he had to do now was to find a way to escape. However, his opponent had accumulated enough power and he had lost the most suitable opportunity to escape. Now, it would be difficult for him to do so. His expression turned cold and he said, "I never thought that I would be forced to this stage. It seems like I have to use that technique." He had a forbidden technique that allowed him to sacrifice his body to the blood god waterfall. His soul could then enter it and become one with it. Before the spiritual opportunity of his body was exhausted, as long as it wasn't an ascended Jinren, no one could be his opponent. Although he would definitely die if he did so, before the spiritual opportunity of his body was completely exhausted, he could at least drag more than half of the people here to hell with him. After making up his mind, he immediately took out the technique. Just now, when he was circulating his magical powers, he was not prepared for a few strands of blood strands that were floating beside him to suddenly stick to him and drill into his acupuncture points. He felt his body stiffen and he was unable to move for a moment. With just this delay, the huge black hand had already pressed down on him and landed right on his body. The entire void realm was quiet at first. After a while, there was an earth-shattering sound. When Fang Xuantong's body disappeared, not only did the 9 doppelgangers in the sky collapse together, even the blood god waterfall was smashed into pieces. However, because the boundless suction force was still there, it only circled around the giant hand and not a single drop was spilled. Only 2 dark red blade gleams drilled out from the gap between the fingers and soared into the sky, disappearing in an instant. After a while, the rumbling reverberations stopped just now. Where Fang Xuantong was originally at, there was nothing left except for the turbid air and the remnant clouds. His vitality had been completely cut off and he could no longer be sensed. Everyone who saw this scene was extremely shocked in their hearts. The dignified leader of the Blood Soul sect, a nascent soul cultivator, a person who had 9 doppelgangers to die in his place, was actually killed by a palm. Zhang Yan put his sleeves behind his back and stood quietly in midair. Just now, at the last moment, he guessed that the opponent should still have some powerful tricks up his sleeves. However, since he had already reached this step, how could he let him succeed so easily? The moment before he made his move, he had already thrown down half of the wishful spirit pill that Zhou Changju had given him. This item changed according to the spirit and moved according to the time. Therefore, when it came close to the blood waterfall, it immediately turned into blood threads and drilled into the body at the crucial moment, slightly disrupting the spirit. Although it was only for an extremely short moment and did not have any killing power, but at this critical moment, it was enough to be fatal. Following the sound of celestial music, the 9-suction demonic slip had already turned into a ray of clear light and wantonly swallowed the turbid spirit energy that was scattered between heaven and earth. However, because it was filled with clear air and looked quite good, those who saw it only thought that it was cleansing the filth and did not think about anything else. Jinren Kongjing's face was unusually ugly. Fang Shun was dead, and Zhang Yan and Meng Zhida working together was enough to kill him and everyone else here. This battle was already lost. Although he was still unwilling and wanted to fight for the last time, at this moment he did not dare to stay any longer. He sent a telepathic message to everyone, "Retreat." After saying that, he rolled up his sleeves and was the first to escape. The people from the Yuxiao school were already panicking, and when they heard his order, they all escaped. However, at this moment, there were two rays of sword light flashing in the Qinsong school's formation. They suddenly flew out and intercepted Zhou Fenggong and Tan Dingxian. Both of them were shocked. They knew that if they stayed, they would die. However, under the attack of the killing swords, it was not that easy for them to escape. Meng Zhida did not chase after Kongjing and the rest, but he focused his attention on the two of them. Under his order, the people from the Qinsong school once again joined forces to perform the spell. In just a breath's time, there were rays of light that shone in the sky and fell down. With just one hit, Zhou Fenggong's body was destroyed, and his spirit was destroyed. At this moment, Tan Dingxian shouted and actually broke through the sword light and crashed outwards. It turned out that he knew that it would be difficult for him to escape, and instead, it would cause the Qinsong school to attack him first. Hence, even though he had a magical weapon, he did not use it and waited for the people to attack Zhou Fenggong. Just now. His flying magical treasure was not weak either. In a blink of an eye, he reached the border of the Void Realm. Just as he thought that he had escaped, a strong spiritual vigor pressed down from the sky. His body could not help but stop and he was shocked. 5 elements escape technique? At this moment, a ray of sword light chased after him and slashed down on his head. He had no choice but to take out his defensive magical weapon to block the attack. However, he was blocked again and he lost his chance to escape. As the leader of the Butian Pavilion, he had a lot of magical weapons on him. Under the siege of everyone, he lasted for a few breaths' time. In the end, with a blank look on his face, he was drowned in the continuous explosion of light. After dealing with these two people, just when everyone wanted to chase after Yu Zhao's group, Meng Zhen said, "Dear masters, there is no need to chase after them. If we go up now, they will definitely fight with their lives on the line. Not long later, the water of the 4 seas will fall, and it will not be difficult to get rid of them then." When everyone heard this, they felt that it was reasonable. Just now, it was a fierce battle, and they had used up a lot of magical power. Even if they chased after them, they would not be able to use much of their combat power. Hence, they stopped and swallowed their medicinal pills. They adjusted their breathing and qi. At this moment, Zhang Yan did not have the intention to chase after them. Not to mention Fang Xuantong's abundant spiritual vigor, the 9 doppelgangers were not weak either. In addition to the items on him and the original spiritual vigor in the magic slip, he had almost gathered all the spiritual vigor he needed. Next, he needed to find a stable place and find a way to step into the 6th transformation state. Hence, he bid farewell to Meng Zhen and flew into the sky. At the same time, Qi Yuntian stood in a flying carriage, his eyes fixed on a yellow smoke escaping in front of him. The person he was chasing was the elder of the Netherworld Spring sect, Li Donglin. Just now, this person came with 3 phantoms and tried to besiege him, but they were defeated and escaped. However, this person's netherworld escape technique had been cultivated to an extremely profound level, and it was slightly faster than a flying sword. Even the flying carriage he was riding on could not catch up, and could only follow behind. Just as the distance between them was getting further and further, he suddenly felt something. He looked up with bright eyes and said, "It's coming." After a while, there was a rumbling sound coming from the top of the sky, getting closer and closer. In the end, there was a loud bang, as if the world was breaking apart, and endless water poured down from the sky. When he saw this, his eyes shone brightly and he chanted, "Stir the 4 seas, overturn the 9-peak continent." He leaped up, and at the same time he used his dharma. With a loud bang, his whole body instantly merged into the surging water. At the same time, on the 9 continents, all those who cultivated the water method leaped into the sky and merged into the boundless water. As the water from the 4 seas fell, it instantly covered the entire broken world. However, the water didn't reach the land. Instead, it floated 100 feet in the air and stopped moving. This was to prevent the water from being connected to the demon's cave, so that it wouldn't be polluted directly. On the side of the Chinsong school, those who didn't cultivate the water method all took out a talisman from their sleeves, held a spell, and drew it onto their body. After this, they were no longer affected by the water. Hence, all of them gathered their spirits, followed the direction of the qi, and attacked their opponents again. Chapter 12:18. After Jinren Kongjing escaped into the distance, he saw that Mengjida did not chase after him. He calmed down and found a hidden place to stop. He looked around and found that only Zhou Ruiying and Wu Yunqing were left. The rest were nowhere to be found. He tried to sense for a moment and discovered that Yuanshi Hall Master Zhou Fengong's aura had already disappeared, so he knew that he was unable to escape. He couldn't help but sigh and say, "Since the start of the battle, our Zhou clan has already lost 2 people. No, to be exact, it should be 3. Hall Master Su Heng had not come out since just now when he was forced back by Shui An's sword. His aura had also disappeared from the world. He just now took out his life tablet to take a look. Although his soul was there, he could not sense it at all. Something must have happened. As for Huiyang Peak Master Wu Fenggu and Supreme Ginseng Hall Master Zhou Yong, they were fighting with others. Within the sense of vigor, Wu Fenggu was fighting 2 against 1, yet he was not in any danger. Zhou Yong, on the other hand, was not in an optimistic situation. He and the 3 qi dynamics from the spiritual gate were gathered in one place, combining the strength of 4 people to fight against 5 cultivators from the mysterious gate. They were initially evenly matched, but there were 2 other qi dynamics that were rushing towards that direction. It seemed that they were from the Dark Azure sect. The situation was so bad that he felt helpless. Wu Yunqing said with a heavy expression, "Jinren Kongjing, our remaining strength is weaker than Qinsong. The longer we delay, the greater the disadvantage. I hope Jinren Kongjing can make a decision on what to do next." Jinren Kongjing closed his eyes and did not say a word. Wu Yunqing thought that he was communicating with Master Lingya and relaxed slightly. As a member of the Wu family, he did not know the specific plan of the Zhou family. But until now, Jinren Kongjing had not given up. He guessed that the sect still had some powerful tricks that they had not used. Jinren Kongjing was indeed trying to communicate with Master Lingya. As a member of the Zhou family, they were connected by blood. In addition, he had the talisman with him. At the crucial moment, he only needed to pay a small price to do so. Only this time. No matter how he called out, there was no response. He did not know that 2 of Venerable Lingya's Dharmakayas had been dragged into another domain by sect leader Qin. The last one had not used its supernatural power fully. Now that he was only at the Grotto Heaven realm, he naturally could not respond to him. At this moment, as he used the spell, his essence and spiritual vigor were continuously flowing away. In the end, his essence and spiritual vigor continued to flow away. The talisman also turned into ashes and dissipated. Jinren Kongjing opened his eyes tiredly. Wu Yunqing hurriedly asked, "Jinren Kongjing, how is it?" Zhou Ruiying also looked over, a look of concern in his eyes. Jinren Kongjing looked at the 2 of them. Naturally, he did not dare to tell them the truth. In order to calm them down, he said, "Esteemed master still has some matters to explain, but I cannot be disturbed. The 2 of you should leave first and protect me." Wu Yunqing and Zhou Ruiying did not suspect anything and bowed. Both of them retreated. After they left, Jinren Kongjing sat cross-legged and thought about whether there was a chance to turn defeat into victory. However, after a long time, he could not come up with any ideas. Unknowingly, the time limit of an hour was almost up. The shifting feather technique was about to be used for the 2nd time. Who knew who it would land on this time? Under this profound technique, even if he could kill the 2 of them every hour, he would still be unable to turn the situation around. It could be said that with the defeat just now, they had already lost the upper hand. There was nothing that they could do now. All he could do was wait for death. He was unwilling to sit and wait for death. He thought to himself, esteemed master will definitely not sit and watch us lose. Perhaps the Qinsong and Shaoqing families used some technique to conceal their spiritual vigor, causing esteemed master to be unable to send voice transmissions. Humph, do you think you can stop me with just this? Since you can't transmit your voice across space, do you think you can stop me? Since I can't send voice transmissions, why don't I think of a way to return to the sect and ask esteemed master in person? Thinking of this, he called Wu Yunqing and Zhou Ruing back and gave them a few instructions. Then he rode on the light and flew towards the Jade Cliff. In the void space far away from everyone in the 9 continents, thousands of clear chi sword lights filled the void space, traversing back and forth. Meanwhile, a yellow smoke river surged like a dragon, surging and clashing with the sword lights. This was where Shaoqing elder Ing Chuanqiu and Mingquan elder Xiahou Wei were fighting. The 2 nascent soul cultivators had been fighting ever since they first clashed, yet a victor had yet to be determined. After all, Ing Chuanqiu's techniques were superior. He was gradually suppressing this great enemy, but it was extremely difficult to defeat him. In the Darkwater River, there were endless demons charging out at every moment. As long as the Darkwater did not dry up, the other party could not be killed at all. Ing Zhenren, with me here, you can forget about helping your fellow disciples. Xiahou Wei's voice came from all directions, but it was spoken by the countless demons at the same time. It looked sinister and extremely evil. His duty was to delay this Shaoqing elder here and prevent him from meeting up with his fellow disciples. He knew himself very well. He knew that he was inferior to the other party, so he did not have any thoughts of winning. His methods were mainly for self-preservation, which was why he could last until now. Ing Chuanqiu said with a deep voice, "Perfected Xiahou, have you not noticed that your spirit sect has suffered heavy losses, and even your nascent soul cultivators have perished? The outcome has been determined. What's the point of stopping me?" Xiahou Wei was not affected. He sneered and said, "Who knows if it's the Xian men who are disrupting my senses? Moreover, who can kill those few in such a short time?" Ing Chuanqiu said, "That qi activity is strong and deep. If I'm not mistaken, it should be Qinsong School's Hall Master Du Zhen. Although he has not reached the 3rd stage, his fighting skills are on par with his peers. It's not difficult for him to kill you all." Xiahou Wei immediately fell silent and did not speak anymore. However, Ing Chuanqiu sensed that although the other party was not weak, his fighting spirit was not as great as it was just now. In fact, he had become even more conservative. He had a feeling that if he were to leave now, the other party would not come forward to stop him. Perhaps other Shaoqing cultivators would choose to fight to the death in a fight between peers, but he did not care about the outcome of the battle. However, after thinking about it, he still decided to stay. There were 2 reasons for this. One was that the Devil Sect's cultivators were continuously defeated, and the overall situation was leaning towards Shaoqing Qinsong School's advantage. Whether he participated or not was no longer the key. Instead, the Devil Sect was in a precarious situation. At such a time, a nascent soul's combat strength was especially important. It should also be because of this reason that the other party had the intention to retreat. However, he did not dare to retreat in front of him, and purposely used that subtle attitude to make him retreat first. Such thoughts could be said to be extremely cunning, but it could not hide from his clear sword heart. On the other hand, Ing Chuanqiu's swordsmanship was profound, and he had already reached the realm of reflecting the heaven's heart. He was the next Taizhua sword-bearer. From the start of the battle, he faintly felt that as long as he did not retreat, he would definitely win in the end. After the 2 of them fought for a while, suddenly, a loud sound came from above. Both of them looked over, only to see that the sky had turned into a vast ocean, and an immeasurable amount of turbulent water was pouring down. "The water of the 4 seas has arrived." Ing Chuanqiu's expression was slightly excited. He was already prepared. Talismans flew out from his body and isolated himself from the water, allowing him to move freely. The countless sword qis actually disappeared the moment they came into contact with the water. It was not that he had kept them, but that they were hidden and merged with the water. In the three lineages sword technique, even if the cultivators of the extreme sword technique and the killing sword technique had the protection of the talismans, it was difficult for them to unleash their true strength in the water. Only the cultivators of the sword transformation realm were not affected at all, and they could maintain their fighting strength in almost any region. At this moment, Xiahou Wei was also affected. If it was just water, he would not be afraid at all. However, it had to be known that this was ultimately a profound technique of the Yuzong sect. The water of the four seas was merely borrowed for use. It was only a part of it and not all of it. Once he fell into the water, he immediately felt a huge force coming from all directions. His body was constantly being oppressed, and it was difficult for him to use his spiritual vigor. The entire Ming water became extremely heavy, and his ability to fight was reduced by 30 to 40%. If he were to fight Ying Chuanqiu under such circumstances, he would be seeking his own death. Even if he wanted to retreat, it would be an extravagant hope. He hesitated for a moment, then took out an incomparably black wooden bead and tossed it into the air. Immediately, a gust of yin qi spread out, and the torrential Ming water was no longer affected by the water's momentum in a split second. In Ying Chuanqiu's eyes, the place where Xiahou Wei was originally at was filthy and extremely yin qi. He frowned and said, "Tunin pearl?" With the Tianin pearl, wherever a cultivator passed by, the clear qi would be turned into murky qi, and the spiritualized land would be turned into a dark place. Regardless if it was a cultivation technique or divine power, it would increase exponentially under such circumstances. This was Xiahou Wei's hidden killer move, and he was prepared to use it at the last moment. However, the torrential water forced him to use it first. Ying Chuanqiu looked at it for a while, and with a change of heart, the sword gleam turned into a stream of obscure water that spiraled and surrounded the filthy qi. However, he also understood that with Xiahou Wei's ability, he was almost undefeatable before the Tianin pearl was completely exhausted. Just when he thought that the battle would continue to drag on, there was suddenly an indescribable feeling. In that instant, all the demons suddenly paused as fear appeared on their faces. Thereafter, a whirlpool seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, emitting an irresistible suction force. With a rumble, the entire nether spring was sucked in. In just a breath's time, it had returned to nothingness, without leaving anything behind. Ying Chuanqiu's expression did not change. He stroked his beard and pondered. A nascent embryo cultivator was killed without even being able to resist. If there was no mistake, it must be because of the mysterious technique that enveloped the 9 continents. Just now, I feel that our luck is rising, but I didn't expect this technique to come so quickly. However, logically speaking, if this technique declares me to be the winner, it should sweep away the momentum of defeat. In the entire 9 continents, it seems that Xiahou Wei is the only one missing. That must be the arrangement of Yu Xiao. However, with this person's death, there are only 2 nascent embryo cultivators left in Yu Xiao's devil sect. If I join forces with Zhenren Meng, Zhenren Zhang, and Zhenren Qi, we can still win without using this technique. Chapter 12-19. At the foot of Taihao School's Duguang Mountain, in front of the big tree, Zhenren Lu was slashing out sword gleams all the time. Although the 5 of them attacked from time to time, her sword gleams were able to cut down any spells that came their way. At first, Shang Shooting didn't think much of it, but now, he felt that the situation was very bad. The life force of the tree beneath him was being killed bit by bit, and as time passed, the speed at which it was losing its life force was also getting faster and faster. The protective light on the leaf was also gradually dimming. If this continued, the tree might really be killed by his opponent. The rest of them were also panicking. Zhenren Wu said, "Master Shang, we can't wait anymore. Looking at the situation, Zhenren Lu will kill the tree's vitality sooner or later. Without protection, the chance of winning is less than 50%. Yi Lingying also said anxiously, "Master, the mountain gate's formation is broken, and this tree is my only barrier. If these people break in, the rest of the disciples will not be able to protect themselves." Shang shooting was also in a dilemma. If they went out to fight, the 5 of them might not be Jinren Li's match even if they worked together. But here, they could only watch as the tree's vitality was killed. They could neither advance nor retreat. He thought for a while and said, "The chi roots of all the trees in Taihao School are connected, and the spiritual vigor below is connected. However, Jinren Li's sword moves are too fast, and there is no time to replenish it. If we can make him stop for a while, I can transfer the spiritual vigor from other places into this tree, and in 100 breaths, it will be back to normal." Elder Exen thought for a while and said, "At this critical moment, I can't hold back anymore. I need to use that item." Thinking about this, he said, "Master Shang, I have an item here called Fu Sheng Pouch. It is the stomach pouch of a strange bird, and this item is between real and fake. If I release it, it can take in all living things in the 100-mile continent, and it might be able to buy some time." Yi Lingying frowned. "Will this damage our precious tree?" Elder Exeni said, "Everyone, don't worry. This treasure only devours living things. Plants are not included." Master Shang said, "That's great, then I'll have to trouble Elder Exen to do it." Elder Exine bowed. With a flick of his hand, he tossed out an illusory green shadow. Fu Xuanbao needed to constantly devour blood and flesh that was filled with spiritual essence, so it had a huge appetite. Even though he was the Taoist grotto heaven of Southern Flower Sect and had the demonic beasts and spirit beasts in his sect constantly feeding him, he was still far from being able to fill his stomach. He didn't need to pay special attention and just walked toward where spiritual Master Lewis. After taking out this treasure, Elder Exeni looked at it closely. After all, Fu Shou's pouch was only a part of the bird and not its entire body, so it wasn't fast. Perfected being Lu was a sword cultivator, and if he wanted to, he could easily dodge it. It would not be a bad idea to do so. He could order this treasure to guard Demu so that he could buy time for the Taihao School to transfer chi. Spiritual Master Lu only took a glance but did not dodge. He continued to move his fingers and focused on killing the big wood vitality. On the other hand, Fu Tianen could not wait to land. In an instant, her figure was swallowed up. At this moment, Hua Xian and Sun Jinren were standing together. After such a long time, he had recovered some of his magic power. He looked at Fu Tian and said, "Looking at that thing, its spiritual essence is uncertain. It seems to come from beyond the heavens and its background is probably not simple. However, this perfected being Lu didn't dodge, so he should be able to deal with it." Sun Jinren's brows rose up and he said indifferently, "It doesn't matter if he can deal with it or not. I will just wait for 10 breaths of time. If she doesn't come out after 10 breaths of time, I will deal with this person." He waved his hand and a wooden pot that looked like it was coiled by vines flew out from his sleeves. As it swayed, there was the sound of rumbling thunder. Although he was standing outside, he was not unprepared. As long as the lightning water in the pot accumulated enough, he could try to break the protective light on the big wood and charge in to kill the enemy. Elder Exan Yi's gaze did not blink. He did not think that this thing could trap this perfected being Lu for long. At the end of the day, this was just a phantom. The killing sword of Shaoqing could cut through anything, be it tangible or intangible. However, although the sword light could cut through this thing, it did not mean that the sword master could come out smoothly. It was very likely that he would fall into the void realm. If that was the case, then it would be done once and for all. Right at this moment, a dazzling ray of sword light flew out and instantly slashed open a hole in the Fu Shou. The enormous green figure shook, and it seemed to be fine, but after a short moment, it collapsed like a shattered bubble. However, after this sword was slashed out, perfected being Li's figure also became indistinct, as if he was going to disappear from the world. Elder Xne was not shocked but happy. He laughed and said, "This is really luck. This person has already fallen into the void realm and can no longer." However, before he finished speaking, the sharp sword light flashed again and the slim figure became solid again. Elder Xne's expression froze and he said in disbelief, "How is this possible?" Hua Xian thought for a while and said, "If I fall into the void realm, I'm afraid I won't be able to return." How did this perfected being Lu avoid it? Sun Jinren thought for a while and shook his head. Just now, she has indeed fallen into the void realm. Hua Xian was slightly startled and asked sincerely, "May I ask Sun Jinren, how did she do it?" Sun Jinren said with a smile, "If I'm not wrong, this perfected being Li's sword skill has already reached the level of cutting through the void and piercing through the two realms. Just now, in that instant, she slashed out thousands of swords, and each sword accurately pierced through the present world. She chased back and forth continuously, using the sword light to pierce through the two realms, making it difficult for the realm gate to close. Then she broke out from it. However, to do this, she needs enough mana to support her. It seems that perfected being Li's cultivation base is beyond our expectations. I'm afraid she is only one step away from the nascent embryo." Shang Shooting took advantage of the gap just now to continuously guide the qi dynamic into the void realm. However, he did not expect perfected being Lu to get rid of Fu Tiankai so quickly. These 10 breaths were not enough to save the sacred wood's vitality. Just when he thought that it was all for naught, he took a glance and was stunned. After perfected being Lu reappeared, she looked like she was in deep thoughts and stood there without moving. He did not know why perfected being Lu was like that, but he was overjoyed. He circulated his mana desperately and extracted spiritual opportunity from somewhere else. The rest of them looked at each other. As they were afraid of alarming this elder Shaoqing, they simply held their positions and did not move. Hua Xian looked at the field and said, "I heard that the killing sword Dao is not purely about killing. With every slash, she would be more familiar with the object that she slashed. Is perfected being Lu having an epiphany?" Sun Jinren chuckled and said, "Let's wait and see." After 10 breaths, Shang Shooting's face was filled with joy. Although the sacred wood's vitality had not completely recovered, it was almost there. At this moment, perfected being Lu finally came back to her senses. She first took a look and then pointed with her fingers. A ray of sword light slashed across the sacred wood. Shang Shooting only felt the branch beneath him shake and the entire sacred wood shook. He was shocked to realize that the qi and spiritual opportunity that he had replenished just now was reduced by 10 to 20% under this sword. On the other side, Zhou Ruiying and Wu Yunqing were on the golden boat and were flying rapidly in the void realm. Before Kang Jing left, he had ordered them to assist Zhou Yong. Moreover, he urged them urgently, so the two of them did not dare to delay. Zhou Ruiying frowned and said, "I don't know if we can make it in time." Wu Yunqing said, "We'll do our best and leave it to fate." Zhou Ruiying heard his depressed tone and turned around to stare at him. He asked, "Senior Marshal Brother Wu, who do you think will win this battle?" Wu Yunqing avoided answering and only looked afar. He said, "It's a pity that Qinsong School started the battle too early. We, Yu Xiao, are not fully prepared. There are many methods that we cannot use. If this battle was a few hundred years later, maybe everything would be different." When Zhou Ruiying wanted to say something, Wu Yunqing seemed to have noticed something. He blocked with his hand and pressed the golden boat down. He said solemnly, "Be careful." After a short while, spiritual light flashed in front of them. 2 Taoists walked in. One of them was around 30 years old and had a serious and old-fashioned expression. Sword light circled around him. The other was riding on a green bird. Zhou Ruiying's expression froze. He gritted his teeth and said, "Shaoqing Qing Chenzi, Qingyu Tao Zhenhong." When Kang Zheng returned to the south cliff alone, the water of the 4 seas had already filled the void space. In order to avoid being detected, he could only escape underwater. This place was less than 1,000 feet high, which was unusually narrow for a grotto heaven cultivator. Along the way, the mountains were all broken, and the plants were all destroyed. However, as long as he reached the void space where the Donghua continent was located, because of the protection of the divine wood, not a single mountain or water could be shaken. After flying for more than an hour, the void space changed and Emochiu Cliff was right in front of him. When he arrived at the boundary of the Jade Sky sect, only then did he slightly restrain himself. He was no longer as unrestrained as before, and he slowed down his body as he slowly flew up the cliff. The elders of the Zhou clan who were guarding here saw the vast starlight in the sky and all looked over. This caused many speculations. An elder said in surprise, "From the looks of it, one of the hall masters has returned. Could it be that they have already won this battle?" However, someone was pessimistic and said, "It's hard to say. The ocean in the sky hangs above. It's obvious that the situation is very disadvantageous. Maybe one of the hall masters has returned to ask for help." Disregarding the chaos below, Zhenren Kongjing came to the front of the cliff alone. Just as he was about to go up the mountain, he realized to his surprise that the front was shrouded in fog and he couldn't go up at all. He could only bow in front of the mountain gate and said, "Esteemed one, just now, the Devil's Doctrine has suffered consecutive defeats, causing my fate to be exhausted. Now, Qin Song and Shaoqing sects are already too powerful to control. This disciple is helpless. I beg for esteemed one to take pity on me and bestow a good method to solve this dangerous situation." After saying that, he waited for about half an hour. A talisman floated down from the sky. He hurriedly took a few steps forward and respectfully held it in his hands. Then he carefully opened it. However, after looking at it, his eyes suddenly widened. After a while, he took a deep breath and muttered, "I didn't expect esteemed one to have such a method." He carefully kept it and bowed towards the cliff, saying, "Esteemed one, don't worry. For the sake of my Yu Xiao's inheritance, this disciple will definitely follow your orders." Chapter 12:20. While everyone was engaged in a fierce battle, Zhang Yan was traversing the boundless current. At this moment, the entire world was surrounded by the vast ocean. Without talismans or people who didn't cultivate in water techniques, no matter if it was casting techniques or fighting, they would be greatly affected. However, he had the 5-element escape technique, so he didn't need talismans to move around without the slightest hindrance. At this moment, he glanced around and was slightly surprised. This place. He did not know which cultivator's cave dwelling used to belong to, but it should have been hidden in the deep sea. However, it was revealed by the space-breaking world chiseling technique. At this moment, there were still some restrictions that had not been broken by the Zhou Yu Tongtian technique. He took a closer look and nodded, "I see." There was nothing strange about it. In front of the cave dwelling, there was an array stone that was hard to find in the world. Its natural patterns were compatible with the restriction array. With a little spiritual opportunity, an array could be formed. Although Xian Shu could destroy the array qi, the stone was not among them. However, that was all. Such a small array stone was only the size of a fist. Not to mention a grotto heaven cultivator, even a Yuanian cultivator could easily break it. He thought for a while and felt that this was a suitable place for seclusion. With a little deduction, he immediately calculated the method to enter the array. He smiled and walked calmly. In just a breath's time, he passed through the door. When he entered the cave dwelling, he activated his technique in his eyes and looked around. He immediately saw through the place. This place was divided into 5 halls. One in the middle was extremely wide while the other 4 were slightly smaller. They were arranged according to the position of the 4 corners. The main hall was filled with spiritual sand. Most of them were gray and dull. Only a small portion was still emitting weak spiritual opportunity to supply the restriction stone. If no one interfered, the formation outside might be able to last for another few thousand years. However, it was currently surrounded by water. However, there was a large amount of water surrounding it and it would disperse in a few days. There were many jade scrolls here. Because they were separated by restrictions, they were well preserved. One could imagine that there were many secret manuals inside. However, he was not interested. As the Qinsong School Hall Master Duzhen, he knew all the secret manuals that could lead to ascension. There was no need for him to look at other inheritances. The most important thing now was to find a way to enter the 6th transformation of strength path. He walked into the hall. He tossed the demonic treasury out, and with a sway of his body, he entered it. As soon as he entered this place, he immediately felt that it was slightly different from before. It was as if there was a strong rising intent in his heart, and he faintly resonated with this object. As he thought about it, He couldn't help but laugh. It seemed that after he learned this technique, he rarely cultivated in the devil's treasury. This demon treasury was not just a place for imparting techniques. It was also a place where cultivators could rely on for protection. However, if one were to act rashly, they would not be able to avoid the fate of death. Fortunately, his mind was firm and he had never fallen into it. He sat down, not in a hurry to absorb the essence chi. Instead, he sorted out his thoughts. All along, he mainly cultivated chi path. Strength path was only used as a method to protect himself. Chi was the foundation of the body. External strength is a means. However, the boundaries between the two were not that clear. They were originally complementary, like a monarch and a subject, a master and a servant. Previously, he was worried that there was still a trace of demonic nature in his body. He originally thought that it was something that affected his temperament, but after studying it for such a long time, he had a deeper understanding of it. He could roughly sense the true use of this item. Maybe it was slightly different from what he had expected. Because of this, he dared to charge up the sixth gate with ease. With a shout, the demon-subduing bamboo appeared in his hands. The bamboo seemed to be covered in a layer of celestial energy, giving off bright lights. It was really eye-catching, and its aura was really pure. Just from its appearance, no matter what, it was a celestial treasure. At this moment, it should have sensed his thoughts and started to tremble in joy. The essence chi in the bamboo was enough. The demon locust shell that he was about to toss in could be left untouched. In the future, it might have other uses. He took a deep breath. His eyes were solemn. With a thought, the magic slip buzzed and turned into a beam of light. It flew into the space between his eyebrows. After a while, an endless amount of essence chi poured into it. Just like how cultivators needed spiritual vigor and precious materials for cultivation, for this strength path technique, cultivators who specialized in yin techniques were the external medicine for breaking through. As the vast essence chi surged in his body, he felt slightly bloated. However, he did not interfere. He only focused his mind and stored his thoughts in the demon-subduing bamboo. There was no need for him to use his technique. Under the guidance of the demon-subduing bamboo, spiritual vigor naturally started to move. After a long time, when the last bit of essence chi in the demon-subduing bamboo entered his body, there was a rumble. His entire body dissipated, turning into countless dust particles that floated in the air. The demon-subduing bamboo stood in the middle, waves of light spreading outwards. Although his physical body had dissipated, his chi path dharma body was sitting in its original position. The light in his eyes was deep, and he was looking at everything calmly. He was able to sense that at this moment, every single speck of dust seemed to be undergoing a tremendous change, and a strand of tremendous energy was brewing and erupting within them. At the same time, the entire devil's treasury also trembled. An indescribable thing was crossing the air and fusing with his physical body. As for the essence chi that was absorbed earlier, it did not seem to be absorbed by him directly. Instead, it was used as bait to draw those things over. This also solved a question that had been lingering in his heart for a long time. When Strength Path reached the sixth transformation realm, it was similar to when Chi Path stepped into the mortal transformation realm. It was a qualitative change, and it was impossible to achieve this with just this bit of essence chi. Around half an hour later, he could no longer sense any of those things. It was also at this moment that countless specks of dust that were hard to see with the naked eye gathered together with a loud bang. Once again, the body was reformed. The demon-subduing bamboo turned into a purple mark and stuck between his brows. It flashed slightly and faded away. If one did not look closely, it would be almost impossible to notice. Divine essence falls from the void, chi disperses. Sixth transformation realm. 100 tribulations won't wear down the body, chi of heaven and earth, one power determines the universe. Two vast rays of dim light flashed in his eyes. He slowly stood up and walked out. Every step he took caused a loud rumble that seemed to be able to shake the heavens and earth. However, after 10 steps, the sound stopped. Since this world was created, other than the dragon sovereign, the demon locust, and a few other sky demons, no one could cultivate to this realm. And he was the first cultivator to cultivate strength path to the sixth transformation realm. Almost at the moment he walked out of the devil's treasury, an aura that caused all things in the world to tremble swept across the 9 continents in an instant. It shook the world, and even the profound technique that maintained the shattered world was shaking, as if it could collapse at any time. In his eyes, the entire 9 continents were no longer hidden in his eyes. It was as if he could break through this world with a gentle shake and go to the other side. He thought for a moment, and his eyes flashed. He said, "Then let's go there first." With a step he disappeared. After Jinren Kongjing came down from the Mochiyu cliff, he thought to himself, according to the master's plan, although that technique can be activated at any time, the later it is, the greater the chance of success. What I need to do now is to stall for time. He sensed the various battlefields and found that Yu Xiao and his allies were all showing signs of defeat. Even the remaining cultivators of the devil sect were hiding in the surroundings and did not dare to move. He shook his head and said, "With the profound technique, where can we hide?" In reality, it wasn't that these cultivators didn't understand this, but they knew their own limits. At this moment, the situation was very bad. Rather than exposing themselves and being surrounded, it was better to preserve their own lives. As long as they could survive, there would still be a glimmer of hope, and it was better than dying immediately. But this is also what I want. As long as these people are not dead, the other side will not have won completely. Right at this moment, a strand of exhaustion suddenly surged into his body, causing his originally extremely clear senses to become blurry, and his heart couldn't help but sink. He knew that after he fought with Mengjida, his vital energy had been severely exhausted, and he hadn't stopped to rest, causing him to have a feeling of being unable to hold on. After pondering for a moment, he sat down cross-legged and swallowed a few restorative pills. However, he still had an order, so he didn't dare to delay for too long. After adjusting his breathing for a moment, he recovered a bit of his origin energy and stood up again. He looked again and immediately found 2 familiar chis, but the situation was just as bad. Zhou Ruiying and Wu Yunqing were originally under his orders to go to Zhou Yong's aid, but along the way they were intercepted by 2 streams of energy. Although they were still entangled for the time being and it was difficult to determine the victor, as more and more of the Dark Azure Sect's forces were freed, if the 2 were to remain in one place for too long, they would definitely be besieged. He thought for a moment and decided to save the 2 first. If there was a chance, he would go to help Zhou Yong. He shook his sleeves and soared into the sky, rushing toward the boundary. However, he had only traveled for a short while when a clear sword light suddenly fell in front of him and blocked his way. From it, an elderly Taoist in his 40s appeared and bowed to him. He said, "Fellow Taoist Zhou, although we have known each other for a long time, we have never fought. Today, we can finally determine the winner." "Ing Chuanqiu?" Jinren Kongjing was shocked, but he quickly calmed down. He could sense that the other party's real body and Dharmakaya were still far away. The person in front of him was only a sword chi manifestation. He had no desire to fight. At this moment, his doppelgangers were destroyed. If he wanted to condense them again, he would need at least 10 days to half a month. Looking at Ing Chuanqiu's appearance, he was still full of energy. It seemed that he did not suffer much damage during the battle with Xiahou Wei. Thus, he activated his cultivation method and increased his speed again. He turned into a ray of starlight and broke out of the boundary. Ing Chuanqiu did not chase after him and watched him leave. When Jinren Kongjing arrived at the next boundary, he raised his head. A sword light flashed and Ing Chuanqiu's figure appeared again. He stood in midair with his hands behind his back and said, "Fellow Taoist Kongjing, my sword chi has already covered the boundary of the chaotic space. No matter where you go, I will be able to find you. Avoiding battle will only delay me for a while." Jinren Kongjing snorted and flicked his finger. A ray of starlight shone and covered the sword light. Then, he thought to himself, if this person wants to catch up to me, he will not be able to do it in a short period of time. However, without the nascent core cultivator restraining me, he will be able to see everything in the boundary. I need to be quick, otherwise, I won't be able to save anyone. Chapter 12:21. In the sky above the 9 heavens, streaks of sword chi that were as dense as the stars in the sky shot down ceaselessly, and they collided with a surging river of turbid chi. Although both sides were extremely powerful and the battlefield they fought on spanned tens of thousands of miles, there wasn't a single ripple that spread outwards. If no one raised their heads to watch, no one would be aware that such a grand battle was taking place in the sky above the 9 continents. This was because the spiritual vigor that supported the mortal metamorphosis cultivators to fight was the pure purple spiritual vigor. Therefore, all the spiritual vigor was firmly restrained and did not overflow at all. At this moment, a vast and powerful aura shot into the sky, causing both sides to tremble and retreat at the same time. This was because the owner of this aura was enough to threaten them. Both of them were surprised, and they wondered who exactly could reach such a realm. There were only a few nascent soul cultivators in the 9 continents, and they might have a chance to ascend to the peak in the future, but none of them could achieve this now. Just as they were thinking, the space in front of them suddenly split open, and then a black-robed Taoist walked out. He cupped his hands to the two of them and said, "Greetings, Sect Master Yu." "Greetings, Sect Master Liang." "Taoist Zhang?" Yu Xianshao was surprised at first, then he sized him up, and his eyes lit up. He said with a smile, "Good, good." He turned to look at Liang Xuani and said, "Sect Master Liang, now that things have come to this, do you still want to help Lingya?" Zhang Yan looked over as well. Liang Xuani was standing on a vast and boundless muddy river, but his face was obscured by the flowing water, causing it to be indistinct. He felt that this person was extremely compatible with the nether river beneath his feet, and he should have refined the river into one. He carefully looked at the river for a moment, and his consciousness seemed to sink into a bottomless abyss, and he couldn't see what was going on. The reason why he came here first. He wanted to give it a try and see if he was able to suppress Yu Xianshao. Even if he was unable to make Yu Xianshao submit to him, he wanted to find a way to make Yu Xianshao withdraw from the battle. In this way, not only would Yu Xuanxiao's forces lose a great deal of strength, it would also be able to free up Yu Xuanxiao's forces. With the two of them working together, it was almost certain that they would be able to deal with Lingya. Liang Xuani said in a deep voice, "Although I can't defeat the two of you, it's not difficult for me to retreat." Zhang Yan said indifferently, "Sect leader Liang, I know what you mean, but you need to consume a lot of purple pure spiritual vigor while I don't need this." Liang Xuani's eyes flickered. "If I'm not wrong, Palace Master Zhang cultivates a strength path cultivation technique." Zhang Yan smiled and did not deny it. With his cultivation, it was not difficult for him to see through this. Liang Xuani said, "Although Jinren Zhang doesn't need to use clear purple spiritual vigor, don't you know that the more strength path techniques you use, the more you use it? The more one was compatible with this world, the more one would end up like the Dragon Lord and the other heavenly demons. He is firmly bound in this world and can no longer go out. From this point of view, Taoist Zhang is not much different from us." Zhang Yan was also very clear on this point. The ancient heavenly demons were one with the heaven and earth, so the heaven and earth would not collapse. Their life force would not die, and this was the so-called Zhou with the world. Only those with great divine power could subdue and kill them. However, there is always a loss. At this stage, one would lose the ability to ascend to another world. He replied, "That's right. If that's really the case, I would indeed be trapped in this realm. However, I've just obtained the technique, so I have fewer qualms compared to Sect Master Liang. Moreover, even if I'm really blocked in this path, I can continue to cultivate the path of Qi. When the time comes, I can just abandon my corporeal body and break through the realm." Liang Xuani looked at him and nodded slowly. Jinren Zhang can indeed do this. He suddenly became silent, as if he was thinking. Zhang Yan and Yu Xianshao did not rush him, they were waiting for him to make a decision. Although the two of them could suppress their opponents with an absolute advantage if they worked together, it was not easy to really kill a Jinren mortal slew. It would consume a lot of spiritual vigor. It would be best if they could resolve it with words. Moreover, this sect leader Liang was not their main target. Master Lingya was their greatest enemy. Even if they had any methods, they should use them on Master Lingya. After a while, Liang Xuanyi raised his head and said in a deep voice, "I will ask the cultivators of my spirit gate to stop and help the two of you deal with Master Lingya. However, I have a condition. The two of you must bring my spirit gate disciples with you when you go to another realm." Although he was not willing to put his life in someone else's hands, he had no choice but to compromise now that the situation had come to this. Yu Xianshao thought for a while and looked over. "Palace Master Zhang, what do you think?" When the two sects discussed, they agreed to bring along the other sections. He did not mind bringing along the devil sect. However, there was no master or subordinate between Qin Song and Shao Qin. Now that sect leader Qin was not around, Zhang Yan, Hall Master Du Jin, was the highest in the Qinsong school in terms of cultivation and status. Naturally, he would make the decision on this side. Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, "I also have a condition." Liang Xuanyi said seriously, "Palace Master Zhang, please speak." Zhang Yan said calmly, "All the disciples of the spiritual gate must swear that they are not to become enemies with the celestial gate when they go to another world." He did not know what the other world looked like. If there was a heavenly demon with turbid qi, he would need the cultivators of the devil sect to suppress it. However, he had fought with the celestial gate for more than 10,000 years. The grudge between them could not be resolved easily. Although he did not need to care about it with his current cultivation, he did not want to leave a lot of trouble for the disciples of the celestial gate and their allies. Liang Xuanyi nodded and said, "Don't worry. After this matter is settled, I will ascend to another world." Zhang Yan nodded slightly. "That's good too." After this battle, the devil sect had already suffered heavy losses. Their power was gone, and there was no perfected person who had ascended to the celestial gate. Even if this group of cultivators went to another world, they would still be the weaker side. They would not be able to cause any trouble. After several generations, the past grudges would naturally fade away. Seeing that both of them agreed, Liang Xuanyi felt slightly relieved. Although he said that he did not care, it was because he wanted to fight for a chance of survival for the disciples of the spiritual gate. Facing two people of the same generation, he also felt a lot of pressure. He sighed and said, "It seems that the fight between the spiritual gate and the celestial gate for 10,000 years has ended today." He paused for a while and said, "I will ask the cultivators of the spiritual gate to stop now." With a thought, he immediately transmitted his voice across the sky. Almost at the same time, all the cultivators of the devil sect's grotto heaven heard his voice. Yu Xianshao stretched out his finger and pointed. The sword light around his body trembled. He used the sword heart connection to tell his disciples that the cultivators of the devil sect had already surrendered and that there was no need to attack them anymore. Zhang Yan said, "If that's the case, I should also give an explanation." After he reached the sixth transformation, he naturally understood many methods of using this state. At this moment, with a turn of his consciousness, he shone a thought into the hearts of the cultivators of the Qinsong, Huanjin, Pingdu, and other sections. Then, he looked at the two people and said coldly, "The next thing is to kill Lingya and end this war." Somewhere in the 9 continents, Pu Xianxing, the head of the Huanjin temple, and Pang Yunxiang, the inner sect elder, were standing on a cloud raft. Directly below them, there was a bottomless pit. Xue Dingyuan, the head of the Yuanzhen sect, was hiding in it. After a while, there was a whistling sound. Virtual images flew out from the pit and rushed toward the cloud raft. Pu Xianxing raised his hand, and with a rumble, countless thunderbolts exploded around him. The thunderbolts spread out like a purgatory of lightning. Any virtual images that came over would be turned into ashes when they were 1,000 miles away. They couldn't get close at all. Zhenren Pang sacrificed the demon-slaying dual mirrors in the sky and shone them back and forth, placing them on the opponent's nascent embryo clone to break the trap. After a while, all the virtual images were finally wiped out. Zhenren Pang looked at the pit solemnly and said, "Head, this person's aura is getting stronger and stronger, and the virtual images are getting fewer and fewer." He's probably withdrawing his mana from the great spiritual steel. I'm afraid we'll have to fight with his real body later. Although they were proficient in the demon-slaying technique, the nascent embryo cultivator was different. Not to mention that his clone was equivalent to a grotto heaven cultivator, the mana of his real body was far stronger than the two of them. It was almost impossible to defeat him head-on. Pu Xianxing was very calm and said, with the 10,000 Thunder Pool and the demon-slaying dual mirrors, even if he really comes out to fight with me, we can still pin him down here and not let him go anywhere else. Jinren Pang nodded subconsciously. With the protection of the Thunder Pool, even if the demon sect's Dao technique came over, it would be weakened by a few times. The demon-slaying dual mirrors could even break through the whims and cleanse the demon chi. Although due to the limitations of their cultivation, they could not kill the nascent embryo cultivator. If there was a chance, they could try to seal the nascent embryo cultivator inside. After a while, the turbid air below suddenly surged violently. A handsome young Taoist with black hair and white clothes came treading on smoke. Behind him was a cloud of gray shin qi that was fluctuating between real and fake. It looked like there were many people standing in groups of 3 to 5, pointing and talking. But unexpectedly, this person's eyes were clear, and there was no killing intent or hostility from him. Xue Dingyuan stood far away under the watchful eyes of Pu and Pang. He bowed and sighed, "To Jinren, this battle is over, you can stop now." Jinren Pang frowned and said, "What does sect leader Xue mean?" Xue Dingyuan only said, "There's no need for me to say more, I think the two of you will know soon." The two of them frowned, thinking that he was playing some tricks. But not long after he finished speaking, they felt a sound in their minds, their bodies trembled slightly, and their eyes revealed a strange look. After a while, the two of them came back to their senses. Pu Xianxing said in a deep voice, "It's Qinsong Jinren Zhang." Jinren Pang said in shock, "How can Jinren Zhang have such a strong cultivation base?" Just now, when the huge consciousness came, the spiritual vigor in his body was stagnant, as if it could not circulate. Pu Xianxing vaguely guessed an answer, but he did not dare to believe it. He shook his head and did not care about this first. He then tried to sense it, and found that the spiritual vigor and qi were unprecedentedly strong. In any case, this meant that the Qinsong school had an absolute chance of winning. He looked at the Yuan Shun schoolmaster in the distance and said, "It seems that the demon sect has really surrendered." Xue Dingyuan bowed. Pu Xianxing thought for a while and said, "Schoolmaster Xue, although your demon sect is attached to our formation, the Yuxiao cultivators have not been eliminated. The two of us are going to go and kill them, and when the time comes, we will need your help." Xue Dingyuan did not hesitate and said, "Since I have entered your formation, I will naturally help. If we encounter the Yuxiao cultivators later, just leave it to me." Chapter 12:22. A ray of starlight flickered in the middle of an ocean, pushing away the surrounding waves and forcefully opening up a region of several thousand kilometers. Currently, there were close to 10 people from the Grotto Heaven fighting there. On the Yuxiao demonic sect's side were Wen Qingxiang, Yuan Hongyang, Hibiko Higashi, and Zhou Yong. On the Qinsong school's side were Du Yunzhan, Han Ziyang, Lu Junyang, Sun Huaying, and Ning Chongxian. Among them, Sun Huaying stood at the side without moving. He did not participate in the battle. It was not that he was unwilling to help his fellow Taoists, but Han Ziyang persuaded him to do so. As a disciple of the Shaoqing slaying sword lineage, even if he stood at the side, his deterrence was extremely high. None of the enemies could ignore him, and they had to divert a portion of their attention to guard against him. Otherwise, if they revealed any flaws, they might be slashed by the slaying sword, which would indirectly weaken their strength. Furthermore, there was another advantage to doing so. At least one person in the battlefield could maintain their battle prowess to the greatest extent. It was easy for them to provide support or prevent the enemy from escaping. Zhou Yong's current opponent was Lu Junyang. Although he had entered the Grotto Heaven earlier than Lu Junyang, and his magic power was also slightly higher, the difference was not too great. Moreover, he was worried about the slaying sword, so he was unable to seize the opportunity to win. He could only maintain a stalemate. After exchanging a few blows with him, Lu Junyang took a step back slightly. Almost at the same time, everyone on the Qinsong side seemed to do the same. Zhou Yong thought to himself. He hurriedly went forward and forcefully used his magic power to suppress his opponent's attack. At the same time, the three demonic sect cultivators did the same, until they held back their respective opponents. Just now, they could finally heave a sigh of relief. Yu Xiao's group was currently in a very awkward situation. Even if the four of them worked together, they might not be able to kill a person of the same generation. On the other hand, on the Qinsong school's side, out of the 5 of them, 4 of them came from the same lineage and had the same source of mana. The last one was a Shaoqing cultivator from the lineage of the killing sword. In terms of killing power, he was above everyone else. If they worked together to attack one of them with divine abilities and treasures, even if he didn't die, he would definitely be severely injured. To begin with, Zhou Yong and the others were already the side with the smaller number of people. If they were any less powerful, they would definitely lose. Thus, he had no choice but to use all his strength to stall his opponent, making it impossible for them to coordinate with each other. It was just that this was very passive, and the consumption of magic power was far greater than that of the opponent. The possibility of defeat in the end was even greater. The opponent of Hibiko Higashi of the Jiuling sect was Hanzai. This Qinsong elder was flawless in both offense and defense, and his powers were exceptionally profound as well. Even if she could conjure a spiritual body to assist in battle, she still wouldn't be a match for him. Seeing that another spiritual body had been destroyed, she couldn't hold on any longer. Because she felt that this couldn't go on, she sent a telepathic message to Wen Qingxiang. Jinren, you've always been full of ideas. Do you have any ideas to break out of this situation? They waited for a while. Wen Qingxiang said, there is one way, which is to retreat. If the 4 of us gather together, we won't have to worry about being teleported away by the chaotic space technique. There are 5 people on the other side, so we'll have 1 less person. Hibiko Higashi frowned slightly and said, with Sun Huaying around, if we show the intention to retreat, will come at us. How can we escape safely? Wen Qingxiang said, that's why we need someone to take the initiative to cover for the others to have a chance. Hibiko Higashi immediately denied, I'm afraid no one will be willing to do so. Wen Qingxiang said indifferently, then we can only wait and see who can hold on first. Then the remaining 3 can find a chance to escape. Hibiko Higashi's heart skipped a beat. Although Wen Qingxiang's words were cold and heartless, they weren't without reason. She asked again, is there really no other way? Wen Qingxiang said, the other way is to continue waiting. If we win somewhere else, someone will come to help us. If we lose somewhere else, where can we hide? Hibiko Higashi gritted her teeth and felt that this was the only way. So she forced herself to pull herself together and began to deal with the opponent. Zhou Yong looked up very vaguely and said, the Xianyang Radiant Star Pearl can only hold on for an hour. We need to make plans early. He had been cultivated by the next master of Lingya in the Yu Xiao school. This pearl was also a protective item given by Master Lingya. Once it was used, it could repel 3 kinds of things that were disadvantageous to him. But no matter how good this treasure was, it still had a limit. Under the pressure of the 4 seas, it couldn't last long. Once the waves hit, we will be in the sea. The combat power of the Qinsong school cultivators will definitely increase. How can we fight against them? At that time, we can only leave first. Of course, he also had a plan in mind. If the situation went wrong, he could put away the pearl in advance. Because he took the initiative, he knew what was going on and naturally wouldn't panic. Since the 3 from the Devil's Doctrine were caught off guard, they would most likely reveal a flaw. He believed that the Qinsong school wouldn't let them go, and then he could take advantage of the chaos to escape. After the 2 sides fought for a while, there was a sudden spiritual light outside the void space. Everyone in the field sensed it and knew that someone else had arrived. After a few more breaths of time, 2 flying ships flew over from outside, and there were a man and a woman standing on each of them. The vital energy and magic energy on their bodies were strong, and not only were they not inferior to Du Yunzhan and Hanzeng, they even faintly surpassed them. Zhou Yong was shocked. Shin Baishuang Qin Yu? Seeing the two coming, he knew that if he didn't leave now, he wouldn't have another chance. So he used his mana and the pearl in the skies suddenly dimmed. At the same time, he used several supernatural powers to force Lu Junyang back and was about to fly away. However, at this moment, he glanced to the side and was stunned to discover that not only did no one from the Yutsong sect make a move, even the 3 from the Devil sect had stopped, and all of them were looking at him with unfriendly gazes. A sense of uneasiness surged in the depths of his heart. He shouted and was about to leave without a care for anything. When Qingxiang sighed and said, "Jinren Zhou, it's hard to turn the tide. I'm sorry." He put his hands behind his back, and strands of blood floated down from the sky. Spirit-dissolving blood evil? Zhou Yong was shocked. This was one of the 3 kinds of primordial evil in the world. He didn't expect this person to have refined it. Just now, when the battle was so intense, he didn't use it. Obviously, he was going to use it as a killing move. How could he dare to touch this item? He circulated his magic power, and the hanging sun-radiant star pearl in the sky shone with light again. Not only did it block the blood-baleful aura, it even pushed the surging waves of water far away. When Qingxiang nodded and said, "You can still use this pearl." Hibiko Higashi snorted and pointed with a finger, using the technique of imprisonment on the ground. Dazzling starlight flashed around Zhou Yong, and he turned into a beam of starlight and flew away. When Qingxiang said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist Dong Jin, this is Yu Xiao's most valuable treasure, the divine light tranquility robe. Any technique of locking down will not work on this person." Zhou Yong didn't go far when he saw a yellow smoke land in front of him. It was even faster than him. His eyes narrowed. Nether escaping skill? With a thought, he executed the heavenly cycle square inch, and instantly moved away from his original spot, dodging a green beam of light that was attacking him. However, the moment he appeared, a blood-red hand grabbed at him, as if it had already predicted where he would land. His eyes flashed, and 2 beams of spiritual pivot jade light were released. Not only did they dissipate the bloody hand, but they also dispersed an invisible spiritual body hidden in the void. Hibiko Higashi seemed to be injured. He grunted and took a few steps back on the cloud. Before he could react, he saw a flash of light in front of him. Several star beads were connected from head to tail. He recognized it was the Shunwei star thunder bead. His expression changed slightly, and he had to dodge. At this time, countless demons were rushing towards Zhou Yong. He shouted again and used the blue sky lightning shock, shattering all the demons that were rushing towards him. At the same time, he didn't stop moving. He used the star oscillation illusion technique, and his entire body became illusory, as if he had left this world. 2 rays of light flashed and passed through his body, but they actually didn't land on him. Even now, he didn't forget to observe the situation calmly. He saw that the attackers were only Wen Qingxiang and the other 2. The cultivators of Qinsong School just looked on coldly, and none of them made a move. He made a judgment in his mind. If I'm not wrong, the Devil's Doctrine should have sided with Qinsong. Wen Qingxiang and the others may want to take me down to show their sincerity. In this way, I may have a chance to escape. Just as he was thinking, a stream of dark water emerged from the void above and below him, and actually surrounded him. Then, a cloud of extremely dense black wind and dark smoke surged towards him. 9 nether great sorrowful wind? Zhou Yong sneered as countless extremely bright starlight flashed into appearance from his body. Within an area of 500 kilometers, the sound of thunder shook, light flickered, and crystalline light shot out like lightning. It tore the heavens and the earth apart, and the dark water and wind in the surroundings were completely swept away. On the golden boat in the sky, Shen Baishuang looked down and said, "This must be the most powerful supernatural power of the Yu Xiao, the infinite thunder of clear sky. This person is indeed the first among the younger generation of the Zhou clan. His supernatural powers are all powerful." Qin Yu said coldly, "He's just a cornered beast fighting." No matter how hard he struggles, it's useless. Shen Baishuang nodded. Zhou Yong looked powerful at the moment, but it was exchanged with the continuous use of supernatural powers and Taoist techniques, which consumed a lot of mana. If this went on when his mana was exhausted, it would be the time of his death. On the Mo Chiu cliff, a young Taoist stood high up and saw the scene. He said to himself, "The people of the Devil's Doctrine can't be trusted. This body only had the cultivation of the Grotto Heaven realm, so it shouldn't be able to see what was happening on the 9 continents." However, before he split into 3 bodies, he had already made arrangements. He could see the situation outside through the disciples of the Zhou clan's bloodline. Although he had expected the change, he still felt that it was a pity. Although Liang Xuanyi agreed to fight with him, he didn't sign any contract. In order to rope him in, it was impossible for him to do so. He understood very well that if Yu Xiao was strong, then Yu Xiao would naturally stand on his side, and if Yu Xiao was weak, then the current situation would be like this. With the Devil's Doctrine changing sides, Liang Xuanyi might attack me together with the cultivators of Qinsong and Shaoqing. Although it's too early to start the plan now, if I don't, I might have to face 2 enlightened mortals later. Thinking about this, his eyes flashed. Without hesitation, he stretched out 2 fingers and pointed downwards. In an instant, a ray of light shone from the Mo Chiu cliff and shone in all directions. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.